Okay. How's everyone doing today? Uh, yeah. Hope everyone had a great May long. Hope your was really good. It's kind of whatever for me. Um, yeah. Uh, so yeah, we're gonna go over some of the new developments in the Alberta election, and then we'll be getting on to the federal elections inquiry stuff. And then we'll touch on some other stuff like how Canada's what is it? The debt, Canada's household debt is higher than uh literally anyone else in like the G7, and how it's even higher than like the 2008 recession. I think we're sitting at like 109% of household debt, which is insanely high. Oh, um, yeah, we're I have some might have some fun later too, but I guess let's just hop into things. Probably start off with a couple articles that I didn't get a chance to read last time. Yeah, we'll start off with this. UC like the UCP shit. um, United Conservative Party candidate who compared transgender children in school to uh feces in food said she's sorry. She plans to learn from it and is staying in the race or run until May 29th. It's a couple days from now. I mean, like, that's fucking wild though, right? Like, come on, bro. Fucking disgusting. I apologize for the way I discussed these issues in September of 2022, Jennifer Johnson said in a statement on Wednesday. No, no, you don't. CP fucking candidates don't give a shit about. Be honest. Um, I have nothing but love and compassion for everyone, equally, and embarrassed to have caused hurt in this way. Johnson added that she is concerned about potentially life-altering medication procedures for children. Bro, you can't just say this and then this being your view, right? Like you can't just say that and have that being your view. Like, so fucking disgusting. This is an extremely sensitive topic for so many, and I need to do a much better job communicating my concerns and objectives in a manner that is respectful to teachers, parents of those in the 2S LGBTQIA community. Yeah, okay, sure. Uh, if elected as an MLA, I will seek the advice and counsel on how to best communicate my views and discuss these issues meaningfully moving forward. Yeah, no, I I don't believe that. Because you know for a fact that they're just going to say the exact same shit, right? Um, Johnson is running to enter the legislature for the first time as a candidate for Lacombe Ponoka. On Thursday, UCP leader Daniel Smith said Johnson would not sit as a member of the caucus in the legislature if she wins her seat on May 29th. Yeah. Yeah. No, like the thing is, hypothetically, it's not looking good at all for the UCP. Like hypothetically, if she was to win, you know 100% Daniel Smith would fucking put her on the on caucus. Smith and Johnson use offensive language and vile analogy. The language used by Johnson regarding children identifying as transgender is simply unacceptable and does not reflect the values of the party or province, Smith said in a statement. Yeah, despite the fact that, you know, Smith literally said the exact same shit on like her fucking radio shit, right? Like, we're not stupid. Like Albertans aren't stupid. Nor are the rest of the Canadians. Like, we see the fucking shit that she's pulling. The election campaign is now on its third week. We're currently on the fourth week, I believe. Early Wednesday, the NDP called on Smith to dismiss Johnson as a candidate. Johnson literally compared transgender children schools to putting a scoop of feces in your chocolate chip cookie batter, said NDP candidate David Shepherd. In the past, Smith has been openly supportive of the LGBTQ 2S plus communities. The premier has said herself, "Don't judge me from by what I said. Judge me but what I do." So here is the opportunity for Daniel Smith to take action. Like, to my knowledge, I think that Johnson is still running, right? Full name. Like, let's just take a look, right? If she was actually dismissed, I would be very surprising if she was removed, because like we see the shit that the UCP have been doing, and they just do not care. Yeah. Yeah, she's still fucking running. Like I thought. Like, it's not surprising in the slightest that she's still fucking running. Like, come on, bro. Like, it just like the UCP is like being like completely fucking transparent with how much they fucking hate anyone who's like not fucking evangelical Christian Protestant who's fucking white, like, or and like straight and cis. Like, they're not even hiding it anymore. They haven't been hiding it for a very long time, to be honest with you. After Smith's party came under fire over Johnson's comments, the UCP leader said at a candidates debate Wednesday night that it's time to depoliticize LGBTQ rights. A lot of this is just performative, right? The only reason why she's saying this is because, you know, she knows for a fact that she's not looking as good, especially in the media, to to voters within Alberta, right? So it's just purely fucking performative. Like, there's no shot that she's going to give a shit after all this, like after the election is done, right? Like, if she does win by whatever chance she has, which is looking very unlikely right now, like there is no shot that she's going to give a shit, right? She will continue to fucking uh, hurt marginalized communities more than she's already done, right? Um, he faced off against NDP's Gwendolyn Dirk and party leader and Alberta party leader Barry Marchinta, both of whom were running against her in the southeastern constituency of Brooks Medicine Hat. Candidates at the debate in Medicine Hat were asked about an audience member how they would endure the protection of LGBTQ children and adults. Dirk, who was a teacher, said every single human being is valuable and deserves to be protected, period. Applause from a crowd. I mean, yeah, that is a good response. Like, that's a good response. Then Smith then added she doesn't like the way the issue has been polarized. What do you mean? Like, the only people who actually give a shit about like fucking trans people are existing are like conservative liberals and just like anyone right of that. Like, that's the only people who give a shit about it, right? Like, no one fucking cares, man. The average normie does not care. There are a lot of young kids who are struggling with their identity and their sexuality who need the adults to be supportive of them as they're working their way through that journey, she told a crowd of about 250 people, a few of whom groaned when the question was asked, unsurprising. We have to depoliticize these issues. These issues are very personal family issues, and every family has a loved one that they support. Every single one of us has a family member who are struggling with gender identity or coming to terms with their sexuality, and we need to give them 100% of our support. Politicize that. Yeah, despite the fact that, conservatives are just making this a fucking culture war issue as well as uh, a wedge issue. Um, Earlier this week, audio surfaced from September 1st before Johnson won the UCP nomination, featuring her speaking to Western Unity Group in Settler about the hazards of the public education system and homeschooling pod school solution as a solution. Yeah, okay. Johnston is heard telling the group that Alberta's education system ranks among the highest in the world for achievements, but such accomplishments mean little when set against the issue of transgender students in schools. Yeah, totally. I don't even believe that Alberta is like the highest ranking in Canada, to be honest with you. Let's check. let's see here. The fuck is what? That's man. As of 2021, the proportion of people with post-secondary education is highest in Ontario at 68%, BC with 62%, and PEI Nova Scotia at 61%. Then both New Brunswick, Yukon at 59%, Alberta with 58%, and Quebec and Manitoba at 57%. So she's not even right on that. Like Alberta, like I thought, Alberta is one of the lowest. We need to fucking better. Like we're fucking losing to Alberta, man. Wild. These kids who are identifying as cats, and a teacher puts litter boxes. Bro, they're literally just using the fucking Republican shit. Like this whole thing, like isn't even true. Like wasn't even true. Like the whole, like this identifying as cats shit, like never happened, right? It was just Fox News pushing right-wing propaganda against fucking trans people. And like the kitty litter shit was because, you know, America has a mass shooter problem, like a mass shooting problem. So, you know, the like it was one fucking school district that decided to give teachers supplies for their classrooms when it came down to like an active shooter situation and someone had to use the fucking bathroom. Like no one is fucking identifying as cats. Like literally no one. She says girls are saying they're not girls anymore. Yeah, another fucking common talking point, man. Yeah, okay, bud. Whatever. When they're 7 years old and transitioning at 14 years old and getting mastectomies, double mastectomies, and getting chemically sterilized when they can't even go to the liquor store to buy a beer. No, that this is not happening. Like at most these people will be taking puberty blockers, right? They're not getting fucking surgeries or whatever the fuck. You know, you have to be 18 if I'm not mistaken before you're able to transition. It's just fucking dumbass propaganda to get the hogs riled up, which just doesn't even make sense because this is literally just fucking American shit. She compared the situation to baking a batch of cookies laced with a drop of feces to explain whether the food has any appeal. Yeah, sure. The fucking UCP or just the conservatives overall, like even like federally, are like a fucking cat turd in the cookie batter. Like the conservatives are like complete and utter dog shit, right? Like I just don't get this anymore, man. Like they're so fucking stupid. We can be top 3%, but that little bit of poop is what wrecks it. says Johnson on the audio. It does not matter. Is it more than a teaspoon of poop in cookie batch? Right. Doesn't matter. Does not matter how that the top 3% of the world cares. Who cares if they got an 89 in chemistry 30? Who cares that they are entering post-secondary if they are chemically castrated? So fun. She also tells the audience that hardcore pornography is available in elementary schools. It's not. That's literally not. Like, literally, like, I remember when I was going through fucking school, right? They knew of all the fucking porn sites. They blocked all the fucking porn sites, man. Like, no one. There's no fucking porn in schools. I'm sorry. The only time when I can think of that someone would be watching porn would be like on their like in high school or whatever the fuck. They have like data in a serviceable area and like in a very like uh out of the way area, right? Like no one's just gonna fucking watch that shit out in like the cafeteria or common space. Like that's so fucking stupid. But like I can't say that, or I can't say that I'm surprised that, you know, this is coming up. Like it's always the same thing. It's over and over. Same fucking talking points. I've talked to these teachers and superintendents and said, how do we fix this? They're stuck. They don't have any answers. Got to get rid of sex education from schools K to 12. No, sex education is a good thing, right? You're not going to be having the same. First of all, you're not going to be having the same conversation that you're going to be having with a like a 5-year-old or a 7-year-old or whatever the fuck about sex as you are with like say someone who's 16, right? No, you're gonna have different conversations. You're not gonna be showing them fucking porn. Like, come on. And in fact, like when you get rid of sex education, like she's proposing here, without proper sex education, you know, teenage pregnancies go up, unwanted pregnancies go up, STIs get transmitted more, you know, like, and like, to be honest, like, no one knows how to fucking pleasure a woman as well, especially not these fucking clowns that are trying to get rid of sex education within in schools. Oh, that should be up to the parents. No, no, you can learn that in a public setting. You know, a gateway to violence expert. This about Christopher Wells, Canada Research Chair for Public Understanding of Sexual and Gender Minority Youth, called Johnston's remark some of the worst and most homophobic or transphobic comments we have ever seen from a political candidate. I mean, this is just conservative talking points at this, like, that she's just rallying off. Like, it's just trying to get the fucking hogs, like, festering at the mouth. This is often the gateway, said Wells, the associate professor at MacEwan University in Edmonton. First, you start with dehumanizing, and then you start to strip rights away, and pretty soon you start to see violence, and that's exactly the kind of rhetoric that contributes to that. Yeah, she's right. As about Johnston's remaining as a candidate, Wells says, how can you have somebody who espouses that? What if you change those words to refer to Black community, Jewish community, Indigenous community. I mean, yeah, the same shit happens to other minority communities. In late March, UCP leader or UCP Lethbridge West candidate Tory Tanner registered after claiming in a video that children are exposed to pornography in schools, and teachers should help change that to change their gender identities. That's not fucking happening, bro. I don't know why UCP is trying to push this fucking narrative so much. It's not even a good strategy, right? Because like you see what the fucking like main things that um Albertans are wanting, right? And like this is a non-issue. It's just fucking stupid. Like they always fucking claim this. It's just to like the only reason why they want to fucking do this is because they state like they stated earlier, it's to defund sex education. Smith recently spoke in favor of the LGBTQ community in an interview before she won the UCP leadership on October 6th. Yeah, and look what she's been doing now. I've been very upfront about this in all my runs in conservative politics, that I have been an ally to the LGBTQ community. I was in favor of gay marriage, Smith said. Yeah, that's just the inner liberal talking. Like, let's be honest. Like, be honest with yourself. That's just the fucking inner liberal talking. Like, that is the bare fucking minimum. And because, like, you know, like at this point, you can say essentially whatever the fuck as a conservative and like completely get away with it. Because it just doesn't matter. Smith previously faced questions over other candidates and controversial comments when she led the Wild Rose Party in the 2012 Alberta election. She stood by a candidate despite her past comments warning gays not need to report or face eternal suffering in hell. Yeah, there you go. That's what she truly thinks about fucking like even gay people. Oh yeah, and this was more of the. All right, let's head over to a lot of the recent breakdowns in the Alberta election that happened this last week.
We will start tonight in Alberta, where the final countdown to Election Day in one of this country's biggest provinces has started. The race from day one has been neck and neck. The United Conservative Party's Danielle Smith and NDP's Rachel Notley locked in almost a dead heat, with about a fifth of eligible voters undecided. Today, the UCP got an anticipated endorsement from their federal cousins, Tory leader Pierre Poilievre, urging the province to...
Automatic L. You're getting a fucking endorsement from Millhouse. Automatic L.
Vote blue.
Conservatives will fight the carbon tax, stand up for Alberta and its energy sector, and unleash the full potential of our Alberta economy in order to grow and prosper in the future. That means more money for schools and hospital. In other words...
Yeah, totally. That's totally what's happening, right? She's been putting so much fucking money into the healthcare system, right? Totally not like people have... or children, little fucking babies have been having to wait out in the cold for fucking like 48 hours just to get any form of fucking medical service within Alberta, right?
Vote for Alberta. Vote Conservative. Vote early. Vote now.
If you want to destroy Alberta, just vote Conservative.
Let's talk now about the state of the race in these final days with campaign leads. Erica Brutis is the Director of Issues Management and Campaign Operations for the United Conservative Party, and Shifra Gadamsutty is the NDP's Senior Communications Advisor. Hi to both of you. Great to have you with me this evening. I appreciate you making the time. I wanted to start off kind of asking you a strategy question and get both your perspectives on this. Erica, we're into these last few days. Given the tight nature of the race, how significant, how important are these strategically for your party?
Yeah, I mean, every day of an election counts. Our focus has been since day one, and will continue to be on talking to Albertans about things that matter to them. We focus on the economy, on affordability.
I mean, like, more and more as it goes on, it seems as like the only way that the UCP can win is by the Doug Ford method, right? Literally no one fucking showing up, right? But as we'll get to later, early voting alone was already what I think like 70,000 people or something like that. Like, to be honest with you, I honestly think the UCP is fucking cooked here. Like, you know, especially after the exclusive that came out on fuck, what was it again? Press Progress about the about how like Take Back Alberta is like essentially bragging that they took over the UCP. So they're pretty much fucking cooked.
On public safety. These are things that we hear at the doors continuously, and things that, obviously we have a strong record on. So, going in, we're going to be consistent on our messaging. We've seen the NDP pull from their playbook of 2019, where they've now shifted into a full-on fear and smear. And as we saw in the clips, they're very much focused on running away from their record
Wait,
as
what?
they did in 2019, because
But,
they
like,
don't.
The thing is, like, for full context, I hate Notley, right? But, like, she is based, like, her fucking criticizers. The UCP has ran as far away as they could from any kind of criticism. Like, I have no idea what she's fucking spewing, man.
I don't want Albertans to be reminded of that.
Let me ask you, because right after the debate, Shifra, we had a pollster on who said, listening to the arguments made by Ms. Notley and Ms. Smith, that if the UCP wants this to be about the economy, the NDP wants the ballot box question to be about health care. Do you think that's true?
Well, I'd have to slightly disagree, because I don't think we're trying to shape a ballot box question. Our priorities are those that reflect the things that are most important to Albertans and their families. And right now, they're telling us that healthcare is the most important thing. We're seeing wait times at multiple hospitals and urban centers go above 12 hours. Yesterday, we had 190 doctors right here in Calgary, where I'm at, sign a letter talking about how our system is on the brink of collapse. 30 physicians in Danielle Smith's own hometown have raised similar concerns last week, and we just haven't seen any improvement. I think it's quite concerning when we think about how long it might take an ambulance to arrive if one of us were to have a heart attack or another medical emergency. Like, these are the priorities that are on the top of Albertans' minds. And
like I say time and time again, conservatives, and even liberals for that matter, don't give a shit about people like you and I, right? They'd rather just turn us into fucking biomatter, especially poor people. Like, they're being completely transparent about it. Like, they just don't give a shit, right?
And we are responding to their needs. We're talking about things that matter to them.
I want to follow up with you on that, and then I have a challenge for your colleague Erica in a second on the same issue. I want to talk about both healthcare and the economy. My follow-up to you on the subject of healthcare, Shifra, is I remember covering the exact same issues, particularly when you talk about the ambulance, more than 10 years ago. Does the NDP not bear some responsibility as well for not improving the situation during the 4 years your party was in office?
Well, I do believe that we've seen an exacerbation, considering the entire world has gone through a global public health crisis, and at a time when we needed our government to show up. And
as well as you're talking about 4 years compared to the UCP, who has, for the most part, outside of those 4 years when Rachel Notley was like first elected, was completely ran by the UCP, right? It's kind of hard to fix literally everything within 4 years, right? Some things are going to take precedent over others. That's just how that works. Like, and then I know especially rural voters see that because, that's not where the most people are, which, definitely sucks for them. But, like, I understand why they do it. Like, they see it not happening, or like none of these benefits helping them. and they end up switching back no matter how fucking psychotic the candidate is. Like 4 years is nothing.
Support us. We had their health minister ripping up contracts, showing up on doctors' driveways, screaming at them, and we haven't seen any consistent improvement. You know, we've seen the firing of public service staff. There's just been no investment in providing these services, and Albertans continue to suffer. It's been 4 years of continual challenge without any improvement, and I think the majority of Albertans are extremely tired of waiting. So it's time for a change.
Yeah, and certainly the UCP, I'm not trying to abdicate any responsibility, and I have questions on exactly what you just said for Erica in a second. But your answer didn't reflect the substance of my question, which was your party was in power for 4 years. It's not like the situation was so greatly improved during that time that Albertans wouldn't be it wouldn't be understandable for them to think, hey, why should we trust them again for another 4 years if things didn't improve with health care?
So the thing is that this is commonly pushed through, especially conservative media, like we're seeing here. It's been they had 4 years, right? What is the fucking excuse that the UCP has for not improving healthcare? They don't have any, right? Because but this is not unexpected, you know, if you want to destroy like a province or country or whatever, just vote conservative. Like the UK is an excellent example of that. They voted Tory for how fucking long? Like I think it was like 12 or 14 years. And their fucking economy is in shambles. The only reason why even like big corporations are behind Notley is because she's a sense of stability, right? So that's the whole reason on why that like even massive corporations are behind her, and how like they're not usually like behind or not going after who they're usually behind, like liberals or in this case the UCP.
Care the first time around to the degree that we might have hoped.
Well, Vashi, you said it. It's about trust. And right now, doctors across this province do not trust Danielle Smith. Albertans across this province do not trust Danielle Smith. You know, we've seen it even with the previous leader. There was a public health care guarantee, and that wasn't met. Doctors have been leaving this province and telling us directly that they're doing that because the relationship has been completely decimated. They'd rather live elsewhere and maybe for a lower economic opportunity because they have stability, they have respect, and we just haven't seen that in the last 4 years. So if it is about improvement, it's really actually about trust and leadership, and Rachel Notley is willing to come to the table and do that. Just recently, she had an audience with the Alberta Medical Association. We received extremely positive feedback for our proposals right now. We're talking about family health teams. We're going to...
yeah, it's not hard to have, like, I'm going to criticize the NDP a little bit here. It's not hard to have good medical proposals when the other option is privatizing healthcare, right? Like, to a certain degree, even liberals understand that, you know, if you attack the public system, you're going to get cooked, right? That's why they don't really try to take the neoliberal approach to healthcare, because they recognize how Canadians view the healthcare system. It's usually pretty positively, despite all of its fucking flaws. But yeah, no, like, you know, if they were to go after it, they would instantly lose that election, right? Because they're like, not only are they like pushing, like, they don't tend to get a lot of leftist voters anyways, outside of like tactical voting. But that, you know, they'll even push like moderate liberals away, and then those people will go vote conservative and fuck things up even more.
sure that Albertans receive a doctor when they need one. They're not going to be waiting for 2 weeks. We're going to address physician burnout, and we're going to engage in the largest healthcare recruitment strategy that this province and the country has ever seen, and it's going to go extremely well.
Okay, Erica, I want to pick up sort of on some of the points that your colleague Shifra made there and ask you, I did find it interesting in the debate that Ms. Smith was saying things are getting better, just give us more time to make them even more better. And yet at the same time, we see, positioned against that, this letter from ER doctors across the province who are saying things are actually at a crisis point. Wait times are long. We know even to get a blood test, it can take like up to 6 weeks or something crazy like that. Does your party not bear responsibility for the way things are right now? And should Albertans have some doubt, just like I asked your colleague, in Danielle Smith's ability to improve the situation?
Yeah, so unlike Shifra, I will answer your question directly. I do think that all governments over the past decade do have some ownership. Danielle Smith has been very clear, and even in response to the ER doctors, that there is...
I mean, yeah, definitely. I don't disagree that, all governments have some form of ownership over it, but some have a little bit more ownership over it than others do. Right? Like, I don't know why you're trying to deflect so hard from the failings of the UCP. Like, you want to make yourself, like, I know you want to make yourself sound good, but like, when the legislation and your actions have been like saying a completely different tale, like it doesn't look good for you.
Situation at hand. We need to continue to do stuff. There is more work to be done. And what she said is that's exactly why she brought in the reform she did. The NDP spent 4 years inflating the middle management as opposed to focusing on frontline healthcare workers. And that's exactly where Danielle Smith and the UCP have focused. And, I know she has said there's more work to be done, but our plan is working. We've seen, accreditations for...
Yeah, it's been working if you have invested interest in privatizing the healthcare system. Like, I'm sorry, but, I don't think Albertans even want to fucking privatize the, or have like an American style system, because we see how dog shit it is. Like, come on, bro.
Internationally trained nurses to be able to be registered here. That is start of the process. We've seen, Shifra talked about EMS wait times. We have seen the EMS times and red alerts reducing significantly. Does that mean that we have solved this outright? Absolutely not. And I think it's absurd for any political party to sit here today and say that they're going to come in and solve everything on day one. Danielle Smith has humility on it, saying there's more work to be done, and that's exactly what the United Conservative Party plans to do.
That's just posturing, though.
The NDP is saying we're going to solve everything at once. They're just saying that their plan to solve things is ambitious. Just to challenge you on the point that you're making, I understand that there's more work to be done, and you can say that. But the point that Ms. Smith was making was that already a lot of good has happened, and I just don't understand how that can be true at the same time as doctors saying that there's a crisis in ERs, and that the reason there's a crisis is because so many people don't have a family doctor. Your party was in power for a number of years. Why didn't you fix that problem?
Yeah, I mean, and I'm not going to sit here and blame a pandemic or anything like that. I do think that did not help some of the initiatives.
The pandemic definitely caused a lot of burnout within the medical community. First of all. Second of all, you're not giving any incentives for people to become doctors, right? If you gave them, like, say, a signing bonus for, as an example, for becoming a doctor, or like even like free tuition, like that will cause a lot more people to want to become doctors. Like I think post-secondary education should be free across the board, but that is a stepping stone at the very least on to get more doctors within the healthcare field, right?
United Conservative Party campaigned on in 2019, but I do think, something that we've talked about, and I know during leadership, all of the candidates of the United Conservative Party, as well as from day one when Danielle took office, have talked about rural healthcare, getting physicians in place. We have incentivization for them to stay in their communities and practice. Again, I would say if we would have had that leadership under the NDP 4 years ago, we would have those doctors in the field and in the province now. And unfortunately, we're stuck here playing catch up, but it is a priority.
What?
I think everyone can agree. Everyone should have a family doctor. No one is going to pay to see a family doctor, but it does take time to train and recruit.
That's literally contradictory to what the UCP has been doing. No, the UCP wants you to pay for a family doctor. The UCP wants you to pay for literally fucking everything when it comes to medical. Like, don't kid yourself.
And have those people here, and they've stolen a lot of our plans already from what we announced in budget 2023.
Yeah, they totally stole that from you.
Okay, I know this debate could continue for a while, and I will keep covering it right up until and through the election. I just have less than a minute left, and I wanted to ask you guys, since you're both working behind the scenes on the campaign, and a lot of people interested in politics are watching this show, if you could summarize, Shifra, the Get Out the Vote strategy for the NDP come election day, is it focused on Calgary? What do you think the secret to your success will be?
Honestly, it's incredibly simple. We have an excellent message. It reflects the priorities of Albertans. We are building momentum. Every rally that we've held has gone over capacity. We are seeing hundreds of people come out, thousands in some places. There's been overflow. And when we ask the room, how many of you are first-time voters, more often than not, half of the room raises their hands. And that tells us that our message is resonating, that people want a leader they can trust, a government that they can trust, and something that's going to bring stability to the province, and a vision that makes sense and is based in things that we are very excited to build.
Erica, I know getting the message out is one part of getting out the vote, but what else is your party employing? What can you kind of share with people watching tonight?
Yeah, we're focusing on, again, the strong record that the UCP has held. There was lots of undecideds that we're seeing supporting us because, to be honest, I think that the biggest failure.
Yeah, a lot of those undecided people are either centrists who are going to vote Conservative anyways, or small business owners because they think that they're going to help them out.
The NDP campaign was their business tax hike. We've seen a lot of businesses supporting, a lot of validators that plan doesn't work, and it's scaring a lot of folks about if they're going to have employment under an NDP, and we're really going to focus on talking about taking care of them and making sure that we have a strong economy.
We have a ton of questions on affordability and the economy. Yeah, we're going to talk. I promise you, we're convening again on election day and right up in the lead up to it. And I promise you we'll focus in on the economy then. I do have to leave it there. I'm out of time. I appreciate both of you making the time for this. I know it's a really busy time for both your campaigns, so thank you. Erica Barudis and Shifra Gadamseti.
Rising prices are making life difficult for Selena Strayhorn.
Gas prices, groceries, rent prices are skyrocketing again. All of this stuff, it gets hard to live.
And that is weighing on the Edmonton woman's mind as she casts her ballot.
Being a small business owner, you're not making a lot of income right now.
Affordability and cost of living are playing a big role in the final days of the campaign.
Definitely see the prices of food increase, and as younger adults, we're definitely noticing the cost of rent increasing.
That's an important issue. We look around and see a lot of needs out there.
The key to success for Alberta families is a strong economy.
The United Conservatives say, if re-elected, they would forbid any increase in personal or corporate taxes unless approved by a referendum.
Yeah, sure.
This commitment will protect Alberta job creators, employers, employees, families, and investors from job-killing NDP tax increases. Tax increases that Rachel Notley is running on that will drive away businesses, investment, and jobs once again.
Bro, what? Like, you've already been driving away businesses. Like, I don't think it can get much worse, to be honest with you. Like, that's so... But, like, the thing is that, like, you know, it doesn't fucking matter. Like, you're pretty much cooked.
Again.
The NDP's plan for affordability includes a cap on electricity prices, a freeze on car insurance premiums, and a new tax credit for children's activities.
This will save the vast majority of Albertans nearly $1,000, and many, many families will save considerably more than that. This is a real investment in long-term affordability so that Albertans will see savings permanently on an ongoing basis.
Advance voting in Alberta has been higher than in the 2019 election. One political scientist says the focus on affordability may be that extra nudge for undecided voters.
I think what we're seeing in the last days here is very much an appeal to economic voters, to voters who want to see how they will be better off under one party or the other.
So, Julia, how do you expect the next few days to go?
So, Adrian, it'll be a sprint to the finish. There's no doubt about that. Both main party leaders are doing what they can to get out the vote. And then there's that big focus on Calgary. Now, that city is the #1 battleground in this election, and the seats won there could very well decide who becomes the next premier. Advance voting wraps on Saturday, and then Election Day is Monday.
All right, Julia Wong, we'll see you on election night.
With just days to go before Alberta chooses its next government, a controversial figure is taking aim at Premier and United Conservative Party leader Danielle Smith. Preacher Arthur Pawlowski, who was found guilty of mischief for encouraging truckers at the Coots border blockade, held a press conference today on the steps of the legislature to denounce Smith.
This person is not representing our values. She is not conservative. She is as liberal an NDP as you can be.
Wait, what? Smith? Liberal? Fuck no. Bro, hogs are insane.
The nature of his relationship with Smith was called into question when a phone call between the two was made public in March. Pawlowski and the Premier discussed the COVID-19 charges he was facing. And late last week, Smith was found guilty of violating conflict of interest rules in relation to that phone call. It's just one twist in an election campaign that Smith's NDP opponent says is all about trust. Heather Urix-West is with me from Calgary. Heather, is this likely to sway voters who support the UCP?
Well, Donna, Pawlowski may have been part of the group that helped Danielle Smith narrowly win the UCP leadership with promises for amnesty for COVID violators and rights protections for those opposed to vaccines. But he's not speaking for the majority of her longtime supporters in denouncing her today. Take Back Alberta leaders say he doesn't speak for them. Albertans, however, may still have questions about judgment, why Smith took his phone call or spoke to the Justice Minister on Pawlowski's behalf in the first place. And it's fair to wonder how much this latest strange twist will move undecided voters.
It is simply wild that this is all circulating in the middle of an election campaign. And while it has made a difference, that's why the election is close, it doesn't appear to be disqualifying.
Yeah.
Good afternoon. The two party leaders vying to be Alberta's next premier faced off in the campaign's only leaders debate last night.
And today, many are questioning what both of them said.
When I say something, I mean it. And that's the difference between Danielle and me.
That if you elect a UCP government, you're going to get lower corporate taxes. We're not going to come through with surprise taxes.
Experts say both Rachel Notley and Danielle Smith were effective in getting their messages across, but political experts say there wasn't a clear winner during the debate. Smith told Albertans she'll extend Alberta's fuel tax rebate and build a reliable power grid. Notley said she'll balance the budget and lower utility bills. Austin Lee joins us live with more on this. And Austin, what are pundits saying about last night's debate?
Well, Camilla, as you can imagine, social media lit up during and after last night's leaders debate. And one of the big things that jumps out here, as you mentioned, is that there doesn't appear to be one clear winner between these two leaders as to who came away having convinced more of the undecided population ahead of this May 29th election. And so that, again, that's the real thing here. Now, meanwhile, Trevor Toome, an economist with the University of Calgary, says the numbers that were brought up by Danielle Smith around job losses from back when Rachel Notley was premier are in fact false. Smith and the UCP have repeatedly claimed that Notley and the NDP killed 183,000 jobs, a figure that Toome says is wildly inflated and inaccurate. However, some political watchers argue the fact that Smith remained on topic and pushed Notley about the poor state of Alberta's economy during her tenure as Premier is enough to be perceived as a win, regardless of some of the misleading numbers and statements that were made by the Conservative leader. Now, one topic that wasn't talked about was the recent ousting of a UCP candidate because of some controversial comments. Smith announced yesterday that if elected UCP Lacombe-Ponoka candidate, Jennifer Johnson will not sit as a member of caucus after Johnson apologized for her September comments comparing transgender children to feces in food. Smith says although there are legitimate policy discussions to be had on youth transgender issues, Johnson's foul language was unacceptable and does not reflect the party's values. Now, however, today, Danielle Smith...
So, I don't believe them when they say that there was no clear winner when it came to the debate. You know, I've seen clips of the debate and everything like that, right? You know, there was a clear winner. That that was the NDP, right? The UCP gave Danielle Smith literally avoided pretty much every single question that was asked her, and the NDP directly answered literally every question that they were given. So it's silly saying that there was no fucking clear winner.
Joined CTV Calgary Morning Live, and she reworded her stance.
She has a lot of work to do. I believe in redemption. I do believe that people have the ability to have second chances. She's got a lot of proving to do.
It's all just performative.
Now, the provincial election is set for just 10 days from now, so voters will be going to the polls before you know it. The advanced voting starts just after the long weekend on Tuesday. We're working to track down additional reaction and analysis to last night's leaders' debate, and of course, we'll have all of that for you on the CTV News at 5. Camilla?
Austin, thank you so much.
In the video from January of this year, Pulaski discussed his criminal charges relating to the Coutts border blockade with the Premier. Now, instead of immediately ending the call, as the Ethics Commissioner says she should have, Smith told Pulaski she was in regular contact with Crown prosecutors, reminding them cases need to be winnable and in the public interest. Commissioner Marguerite Tressler said she could not find evidence of an email or conversation with Crown prosecutors, but did determine Smith contravened the Conflicts of Interest Act when she called then Justice Minister Tyler Shandro to influence the Crown's prosecution of Pulaski. The commissioner stated that call was, quote, inappropriate and not acceptable because elected officials should not interfere in the administration of justice. Tressler wrote the call from the Premier put considerable pressure on Shandro and said he
Could you imagine if the Liberals did this, like the federal Liberals? The Hogs would be going ape shit, right?
must have felt concern for his tenure as minister as a result, something she describes as a threat to democracy. She also found Shandro defended the independence of Crown prosecutors in the call. Now, Pulaski was eventually found guilty of mischief and breaching a release order.
Independence
In a
Party,
statement,
what a
Danielle
fucking
Smith
loser
said she
party,
asked
man.
Shandro for his advice on what could be done about COVID-related offenses. She went on to say, quote, I will be seeking legal advice on creating specific formal guidelines as to when and how a premier may speak with a Minister of Justice in the future about police and other sensitive matters. The NDP say with the looming election, the Ethics Commissioner's findings are something voters should consider.
They have that report. They can read that report for themselves. Danielle Smith did break the law. They can pronounce their judgment on May 29th because she cannot be trusted.
Now, to be clear, this isn't a criminal violation. As for the ramifications of the Ethics Commissioner's
It should be a criminal violation. Full honesty, it should be.
findings, she said she won't impose sanctions on Smith during the election, but may revisit the issue when the legislature is back in session. She did, however, recommend mandatory training for all new MLAs on the roles of the 3 levels of government in Canada.
Bro, you're talking about the person who literally thinks that the federal Liberal government is not a national government. Like, that training is going to be incredibly fucking scuffed.
Now, there is no denying there is a lingering hangover from the pandemic among many people in this province, and not just from those angry about restrictions. The healthcare system spent years under siege, and that's made the future of healthcare the #1 ballot issue heading into voting day.
Daniel Smith wants to dismantle public health care and force you to pay to see a doctor.
In a province where politics was once about pipelines,
And I believe no one should ever have to pay out of pocket to see a family doctor.
healthcare now reigns supreme. And post-pandemic, things are a mess.
3 years I've been on a list.
We're even getting to a point now where emergency rooms are closing.
We have one obstetrician and gynecologist in Lethbridge.
It was getting to the point where it was dangerous for me to drive.
Problems with healthcare aren't Alberta's alone, but within the province, the COVID years saw plenty of acrimony between healthcare workers and the Jason Kenney UCP. That conflict has had consequences.
Data from the Canadian Institute for Health Information, CIHI, shows that we lost more family physicians to net migration out than any other province in 2022.
Alberta's next government will need to bring those doctors back while working to address a backlog of deferred care.
The pain was excruciating.
Calgary stage actress Catherine Kurbis had been waiting for a hip replacement for nearly 2 years when a surgeon told her she'd have to wait at least 1 year more.
My husband immediately started looking at
fucking
private
ridiculous,
surgeries
man.
because he knew how much pain I was in all the time.
So in March, Kurbis paid out of pocket to have her surgery in Toronto. According to the Canadian Institute of Health Information,
and it probably
Albertans
wasn't
had
even
some
that
of the
great.
longest waits for hip and knee surgery in 2022. In January, the United Conservative Party unveiled a plan to contract thousands of orthopedic procedures each year to a private surgical facility. Though CIHI says the impact of this move is not yet known.
A lot of the contracts have just most recently been signed, so it will be interesting to see its impact on both the waits and the numbers of people waiting for surgery.
The Alberta NDP, meanwhile, says it will address surgical wait times by expanding access solely within the public system. Two parties.
Our UCP team is improving healthcare for
with two different plans.
Our Alberta
Bro, what's
NDP
with the
will fix
fucking,
healthcare.
like...
Question for voters.
What is with the politician walk? Like, they're both doing it.
Leave. Heather Yurex West, Global News, Calgary.
Oh, man.
Drake and Sarah Worth say the votes they're casting could define Alberta's economic future.
Oil is being less kind of used around the world, and it's not as much of a profit center in the years to come, so we need to look beyond that.
I mean, he's right.
The Worths are among the more than tens of thousands of Albertans voting early on the first day.
We have one party that's not fiscally responsible from my perspective, and another party where the leader talks out of both sides of her mouth all day long.
Hi, how are you guys doing?
Good.
As advance voting began, UCP leader Danielle Smith was cheerful at the ballot box.
As we counted, do I get a receipt or anything? No.
What?
Likewise, NDP leader Rachel Notley also keen to project confidence.
This is an important election for Alberta.
But no one has a clear edge in the polls, and no single issue dominates the race.
Climate change is a big thing. Employment's a big thing.
Just a nice, stable government and someone that's listening to the people.
To trust the person that we're electing, that what they're saying now is correct.
This political analyst says it's not clear what more the parties can do to convince undecided voters.
UCP is claiming we can't afford another 4 years of NDP government. On the other hand, the NDP leader is saying we can't have 4 years of this person who is not trustworthy. It's kind of an even battle.
As for the Worths, they have...
I mean, one seems a little bit worse than the other, though. Like, I don't expect like most people to keep up with politics just in general, right? But like, you know, one is a little bit worse than the other, right?
High hopes for whoever wins.
I want to see someone who's fighting for Alberta as part of Canada as a whole, but also just showing that it's more than just about big business and is about people.
Both parties are now focused on going door to door and getting supporters to cast their vote, and they don't have a lot of time. There's less than 1 week to go until Election Day. Julia Wong, CBC News, Edmonton.
Rising prices are making.
If elected, the UCP will continue to make life more affordable by cutting your personal income taxes and extending the fuel tax holiday. We'll crack down on criminals with more officers on the ground and ankle bracelet monitoring of violent offenders out on bail. And we will continue.
I mean, like, the thing is that, like, police on the ground is not going to solve the crime thing, right? Have to look at the root problem of crime, right? Poverty. Poverty and crime are inherently linked. You solve poverty, you're going to solve a vast majority of the crime, right? Because for the most part, people don't really want to things like steal, for example, right? They do it out of necessity. They don't do it because they're bad people, right? They're doing it out of necessity. Like, if you want to solve crime, you got to look at that factor, the root cause of the problem.
To invest in healthcare and mental health addiction treatment while ensuring no Albertan ever has to pay out of pocket to see a family doctor.
Tonight, I want to talk about a better future for Alberta, where we fix healthcare, lower household costs, and create jobs. This election is about trust, and it's about leadership. I will work every day to be the premier you deserve, creating jobs and diversifying for the future. I won't raise your taxes. I will cap your bills.
What will you do to support all Albertans with the rising cost of living as inflation continues to have a real impact?
We know we're going to continue to see an increase in the federal carbon tax. That's why we're going to offer an 8% personal income tax rate. It brings us pretty much in alignment with Alberta or with Ontario and British Columbia. It'll give $1,500 per family, and we'll also extend that fuel tax rebate until the end of the year.
The fact is that most Albertans' utility bills look more like a mortgage payment. And your insurance costs for your car, well, that looks more like what you save up for your whole summer vacation. We're going to put a cap back on car insurance, and we're going to help families reduce their utilities. And most importantly, we will never, ever, ever make them pay to see a family doctor.
What can government do to bring down the actual cost of utilities going forward?
In the pre-election period, the UCP put a cap on what folks are paying for their electricity just for the last 4 months. What they don't know is that, in fact, come June, they're going to have to pay that back. And that's going to cost about half of Alberta families about $200 million. So the first thing that we will do is we will actually have those families' backs, and we won't force them to pay back the cost of Danielle Smith's pre-election attempt at distracting people from what UCP policy has done to their utilities.
We have to build a power grid based on it being reliable and affordable as opposed to based on ideology. We have a federal government that is propped up by the NDP that has put war on natural gas. Our power grid here is...
Bro, she's literally just trying to dodge fucking questions and blame all of Alberta's problems on the federal government, despite the fact that literally all the problems that are happening in Alberta are literally due to fucking conservative policies.
It's almost 90% natural gas, and yet we have a federal government that wants us to be able to be completely abated on natural gas by 2035. That is the commitment that Ms. Notley has signed on to. She wants to achieve that. That's going to cost $52 billion and increase our power bills 40%.
Fixing healthcare isn't just about spending more money. What are your creative and transformative approaches to restoring confidence in the system?
The answer is to get more Albertans access to a family doctor. By doing that, with our costed plan, we can take the pressure off of our emergency rooms, off of our surgical wait times, off of our ambulances.
You're going to have 25% of our doctors on an alternative payment system within the next 5 years, and that allows for team practice. It allows for nurse practitioners and LP.
Just say private. Just say private. Come on. Just say it. Say it with your fucking chest. Just say private, man. Come on.
Psychologists and other health practitioners to work together in a team practice so that more access will be given on primary care.
Given the historic reliance on the oil and gas sector for jobs and government revenue, the world beginning to shift away from petroleum products.
Economy and jobs are the key issue in this portion of the debate.
We believe that we are going to reduce emissions, not that we are going to reduce oil and natural gas. We know that with all of the exciting things that are happening with carbon capture, utilization and storage and all the green technology, we can continue to have a robust, vibrant...
Like, honestly, like, carbon capture is just a fucking scam, right? Like, no one fucking thinks it's going to solve everything. It's just an excuse for fossil fuel companies to keep producing more and more fossil fuel and not have to pay the consequences for it. That's all that it is. Just a fucking scam.
Oil and natural gas sector for years to come.
I want to create jobs producing energy. I want to create jobs upgrading our energy. And I want to create jobs reducing emissions. We have a plan to hire 4,000 teachers to try to catch up over the next 4 years, 3,000 more EAs, and to restore PUF funding.
We're giving more funding for mental health, more funding for complexity, more funding for transportation, making sure that every school district has the funding it needs to make its own decisions about what the best mix in the classroom is so that they can meet the local needs.
I was pleased to see that Ms. Smith made the announcement to restore the funding to police officers that the UCP cut at the beginning of their term by hiring the extra 150 officers. We matched that, and then we also went further and said we would also hire 150 more social workers, mental health therapists, those kinds of folks.
We've embedded sheriffs in both Calgary and Edmonton. We're adding 100 police officers in both Calgary and Edmonton because we believe that people have a right to take public transit and feel safe.
Yeah, okay.
So Julia Wong joins us now from Edmonton. Julia, this race obviously very tight. What's the tone like between the candidates?
Well, Adrian, to be frank, it got a little feisty during this debate, and it really was during the free debate when the leaders had a chance to go toe-to-toe with one another that you could see that come out. While they were trying to be cordial, they were also honing in on the others' past records, on the others' past comments. During the affordability section, there were questions about the cost of utilities. Check out this exchange that happened when the issue of carbon neutrality came up.
We have to fight back against Ottawa. This candidate will not. We have to fight back against Ottawa and make sure that we put a target that's reasonable, realistic, and achievable.
I know you're keen on fighting. You want to fight with Ottawa. You want to fight with the media. You want to fight, frankly, with your former self. It's actually quite exhausting.
So you can see Smith really leaning into how she is the best person to be standing up to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, standing up to Ottawa, and then you have Notley taking those jabs at Smith's previous comments that have in the past got her.
Literally no one fucking cares, right? Everyone's more concerned about the fucking rising costs of living and, you know, being able to have a fucking roof over their head and food on the table, right? They don't give a shit about that fucking nonsensical bullshit that Smith is trying to push, being like, oh, Justin Trudeau is responsible for everything. No, take a little bit of fucking fuck, so tired. Take a little bit of fucking responsibility, own up, and, you know, fucking say shit with your chest, like you mean.
Her into some trouble.
Okay, so Julia, 3 key topics tonight: affordability, healthcare, the economy. Is there one that stole the show?
Yeah, I would say definitely during the economy section, it was really interesting because that is an area that Albertans are thinking about. What does the oil and gas sector look moving forward? Now, you could see that Smith was really emphasizing Rachel Notley's 4 years when she was premier and taking jabs at her tax policies. Take a listen.
When you take a position of increasing business taxes, you're creating a lot of uncertainty in our sector. We now have more corporate income revenue than we have in our history, $6.4 billion. When you reduce taxes, you end up attracting jobs and
revenue. I wonder what she means by that, and I wonder where all that revenue came from. Oh yeah, it was underfunding the fucking healthcare and education systems within Alberta. That's where all that money came from. Like, you should not have fucking revenue, right? And if, like, hypothetically you do, right? Say you got everything done you wanted to do. Okay, cool. You can put that into that money into a different sector, right? All that money that she is claiming that is good literally came from the funds that were supposed to go into the healthcare and education sectors.
Investment and people. When you increase taxes, you chase it away.
And on the other hand, you have Notley stressing how Smith and some of the comments she's made in the past, they bring uncertainty when it comes to Alberta's economy.
I find it deeply ironic that Ms. Smith is talking about uncertainty and its impact on attracting investment. This is a person who, well, started by bringing in the Sovereignty Act, an act that her former finance minister very clearly said was going to chase away investment because it undermined the rule of law.
He was right.
So a lot to digest from this packed 1
He was literally
hour.
right.
Definitely a lot of opportunity for Albertans who may not know at this point who they're going to vote for, which way they may lean. And we'll definitely see the impacts of this in the coming days. And as we head closer and closer to Election Day, Albertans head to the polls on May 29th.
All right, thank you, Julia. Julia Wong in Edmonton.
What is this? The neighbors are going to think we're communist? This is awesome.
On a quiet street
I
in
love
Pincher Creek,
I love capitalist media so much because you vote progressive in a rural area, you're seen as communist. That is fucking awesome.
are dots of orange that break up a sea of blue election signs. Geneva Green was out when her husband put up their NDP sign.
When I came back and he had gotten the sign up, I said, gee, Jim, our neighbors are going to think we're communists.
The Greens
Yeah,
are
totally.
in the McLeod.
Like, the thing is that, like, the NDP aren't even fucking communists. They're nowhere even close. Like, I vote NDP because, like, they're the closest thing we have to, like, a leftist party within Canada that could reasonably win, like, even a federal election. Like, the NDP win, like, provincially, but, like, they haven't won federally, so, like, I think at this point, what's the fucking harm in giving them a chance, right?
A riding the UCP won by 50 points in 2019. While the election has been a neck-and-neck race, the NDP aren't very competitive in most parts of rural Alberta. The UCP is at 65% support and the NDP at 31% outside Edmonton and Calgary. But progressive voters see the playing field as more competitive this time.
Mm-hmm.
Been a conservative reigned province for many, many years. We had a nice little cycle. But it's I don't know. I think people are maybe feeling unhappy with that and looking for more options.
The NDP's chances in rural Alberta have improved since the last election, when they only got 23% of the votes cast in those 41 ridings and won just 2 seats. This time, the campaign is aiming for 5 or more by appealing to former progressive conservative voters, a strategy the UCP leader poked at this week.
Rachel Notley was the worst premier this province has ever had.
What?
They want to distract attention from the fact that 183,000 jobs were lost during her 4 years in government.
But, like, the thing is, I think we'll be getting into this after, but, like, the thing is that if we use the metrics that Danielle Smith is using, which those numbers aren't even real for the matter of fact. But if we were using her metrics, Daniel Smith would have lost, I think it was jobs. What where was it again? I think it was like 270,000 or something like that. By like her metrics, like all I remember it was like double the amount that the NDP had allegedly lost.
People were leaving this province in droves. Investment was leaving this province in droves.
I mean, that's
Jobs
literally
were
happening
leaving this
now.
province in droves.
Experts say shifting demographics, culture, and economics are moving votes in Alberta. That uncertainty is especially sharp outside the two big cities.
Is it going to, flip 10 seats? No, I don't think so. Are there going to be a few races that are far closer than we, would have ever been, 10, 15, 20 years ago? Absolutely, there will be.
Better candidates and stronger polling looks poised to give the NDP a lift, but it's unlikely to win them more than a handful of seats outside Edmonton and Calgary, making the path to victory harder. If they do win after Monday's election, the NDP looks likely to form a government largely without rural representation. Elise Von Schiel, CBC News, Calgary.
Yeah. Okay.
This person's asking about some of the NDP's policy ideas.
So yeah, these are some of the NDP's policy ideas. They released them like yesterday or something like that.
I have good news on that front. They've already shared what their first 3 bills are going to be, and it'll give you some insight into how they intend to govern. The UCP haven't published any of their future bills. They don't want to tell you about those. Let's have a look, shall we?
Unsurprising.
Bill 1 is the Save Albertans Money Act. It includes a cap on home electricity rates, an elimination of the power price debt that was imposed by Danielle Smith, a tuition freeze, a child activity...
Which we know about, like, they've already, we've already heard some of this, right?
Tax credit, $10 a day childcare expansion, an auto insurance rate freeze, utility relief, and a re-indexing of AISH, the seniors benefit and income supports. There's a lot here. So that's Bill 1. Bill 2 is a repeal of the Alberta Sovereignty Act.
Which,
it'll also eliminate the small business tax rate and reinstate...
And, that would be more beneficial to Alberta in general, because, it's mostly been hurting Alberta, like, investment-wise.
Reinstate some tax credits. Bill 3 is the Canada Pension Protection Act. Basically, it's meant to protect the CPP from future attacks by the UCP.
Which is good.
So yeah, that's how the NDP plan to get out of the gates. The UCP haven't shared anything. They're trying to keep their whole policy hush-hush, as well as their leader. Really, the less you know them, the happier they are.
Like, is that really surprising, though, that, the UCP wants to keep their policies behind closed doors? Like, that should tell you all that you need to know, right? Okay, so, like the Ontario election, the Alberta election is going to rely heavily on voter turnout. And we've already gotten a decent amount of, or there's already been a decent amount of people for, like, early turnout, or early voting, right? They had a total of, last time I checked, 2,000 or something like that. Relatively high, all things considering, for early turnout. Yeah. Okay. Well. So yeah, we'll get into the battleground areas with advanced voting open in Alberta, and election day looming on May 28th. CTV News Edmonton has compiled a list of ridings to watch the capital region. Analysts have touched Calgary as where the election won or lost for the UCP and NDP, but a number of Edmonton area ridings could prove pivotal for the parties. Ridings. Edmonton Southwest, a lone Edmonton riding in the UCP won. The incumbent received 44, so essentially 45%. And the challenger from the NDP got 41.8%. Good. Grove Sunny Plain. Spent 1%. Shearbrook Park Ed. CP flipped these two ridings. 2019. Brook Park was by 45%. $53.6 for the UCP. Like, chances are, if the NDP takes half of these, you're fucking. Like, they're all like, I already think the UCP is already pretty fucking cooked. St. Albert, Warren Vale Street, Albert. He kept it with their 40. Other one. CP kept 450. Definitely some. Man. Tired. An election shaping up to be a historically tight in a provincial or province that never really ever had a close outcome. Not only does Alberta stand alone in Canada by never having a minority government, only like majorities. The second place finisher in the province never come within a few winning. UCP's Jason Kenney won last time 44 margin, and Motley before won 3 more seats than Wild Rose in 2012. Daniel Smith finished behind then toward Premier Allison Ritt. Gap between Ralph Colvin and his liberal challenger in 1993 for the closest of any election last World War. narrow is just narrow just hasn't been arsenal of objectives. This land of wide political spaces. But in 2023, so many signs point more of a nail biter, polls, seat projection, and a million straggy emojis, text exchange, political. Grab from here to election night will come down to the electoral equivalent of hand-to-hand combat, persuasion, voter activation, motivation, and demotivation looked. When the voting's done on May 29th, we will know the answer to this question. So are people shifting between the NDP or from the UCP to the NDP? Rachel Notley's party began hailing a string of full progressive endorsement endorsing the NDP. Get to shortly. From some highways from Peter Lehedge's day, former Attorney General Jim Foster, a Richard LA Senator Ron Gither to Lieutenant or Alison Redford, ex-minister Thomas and Griffiths. None, with perhaps the exception of former Deputy Premier. That's our household names. That jolt typical voters into action, nor have any of them associated with the UCP. Subs. The old PCs have drifted relationship right, or the coalition shift right. Former politicians represent exactly the sort of Albertans the NDP MP side, moderate, centusioned, current conservative brand on offer. The target Calgary ridings the NDP heavily into lend us your vote pitch with a letter signed by Notley. You've usually voted conservative at election time. I want to say this. This time, in this election, let's team up. Could potentially work. Many former Tories will likely incumbents to publicly back Notley for fear of ostracizing themselves from their social circle or putting themselves out of favor with sitting government. But in the privacy of the ballot box, they'll orange. There are still many bottle reputational harm for openly backing. You work in oil or and gas or live heartland. I drove last week through Cardiff, tiny helmet north of Edmonton, in competitive Cornville, Alberta riding. 7 UCP signs, 4 NDP signs, near comparable to ratio of votes party received. Excuse me. Perhaps it's brave to advertise your NDP support in that rural community, and more quietly want Smith to lose without showing on their front yard. Shyness will cut other way. Settings polls say that university degree holders overwhelmingly support. So odds are the doctors, teachers, other professionals more discreet. They're conservative. Yeah. But the thing is that generally speaking, like more smart you are, generally the more like left. Like that's not always the case, right? There have been of those people voting and vice versa for haven't received secondary education. May especially be the case given all the controversies surrounding Smith. It might be that those in polite society don't want outed as Smith voter, leads to how Smith has. Much will Smith's past care about? They should care a lot about it, right? Because like the thing is if she does and says stupid shit, right? Within like even like the last 2 years, who's not to say that's going to continue? Oh, it's going. Danielle Smith has previously called being pro-vaccination a stepping stone, Nazi-like tyranny. Yeah. Yet she's also the one who thinks that of fucking Ron DeSantis. Fucking loves. Danielle Smith has previously called. She called paying out of pocket for a doctor's visit a noble policy goal. So does Scott Moe, Heather Stephenson, and Doug Ford. And I imagine some of the other conservative premiers. She also called her justice minister a few months ago, hopes he could deal with a pastor's charges, breach of conflict law, and threat democracy. The ethics commissioner report founded. Yeah, like it should be fucking criminal, right? All candidates have baggage. You have the full baggage counts. Carousel. Smith does, and add to that some of the conservatives, notably Jennifer Johnson remarks on trans students. And it's reasonable for Albertans to wonder if the Lake of Fire controversy Smith and the Wild Rose Party in 2012. Why does she see 2023? Oh my god, I'm fucking cooked. My brain is cooked. um Difference lies not only in the fact that this time Smith Jetson with appalling utterance, so may let her back caucus enough. Yeah, that's what I predict as well. Progressives will say that in a post-Trump era, people are more forgiving of candidates' past problems if they're wearing the right party color. Yeah, I mean, that is true. That literally is true. Um, that might that might not be it. Consider that in 2012, voters ran from the Smith and turned to this election. NDP trying to stand in as a safe harbor choice, but affect Alberta. I mean, a lot of that, what I understand, like rough economy, like from the Conservatives, UCP have endlessly depicted their competitors as job killers and mongers. He will be oil price records over the 3 years, not leave in reverse revenue over stretch 45.9 last one gilded office. However, Notley gave her tractors fresh week. A reminder why she strong in the economy or business development, promising a corporate tax point, even if it would keep Alberta at Canada corporate rates. Logs 8% tax hikes. Um, Smith this week promised Bill 1 that doubles back ad. It would prevent the NDP or any future government from hiking personal or corporate rates without a referendum, while she agreed to cut it of decision. Notley is running on trust and leadership in Calgary, but smaller community name run bitter or fondly Notley struggled to change that perception here. So, think is going. What do you think the turnout's going to be? I think it's going to be higher than Ontario's for sure. Early to tell, but I think higher than Ontario. Last election was multiple decade high in voter engagement when 67.5% eligible Albertan ballot. Most of them keen to vote E and turn out Notley's Democrats and higher than the change. Then there's the record low in 2008 when timid enthusiasm for long shot opponent brought a turnout down to 5%. Well, the stakes are high and the potential differences between choices are clear. Both sides get bogged down by their negative impressions. Like, I honestly think if they didn't run Notley again, I honestly think like it would have been a wrap, right? They should have ran someone who, in my opinion, is more charismatic than Notley, as well as like, you know, yeah, just someone who isn't Notley and like is more charismatic. Like then the UCP would have been cooked, like 100%. Half the people Smith hate, or half of the people hate Smith. The other half hate Notley. One political said. Yeah, but I think there's a lot more hate towards Smith than Notley, right? Like, a lot of it is because, like, for Notley is because, you know, she couldn't really do anything within, like, fucking 4 years, because that's, like, a thing to get done, or, like, no time to get done anything, right? Especially, like, massive projects. The election boils down to vote for me, I'm not the UCP, versus vote for me, I'm not the NDP. If the options are such turnoffs, especially for past conservative voters, queasy about Smith, staying home becomes a viable option. And as much as both parties are trying to motivate people to vote, there are also suppression tactics to make would-be voters for rival parties so disillusioned that they don't vote. Yeah, but generally speaking, you know, it tends to be fucking conservatives that want to suppress the vote because it's easier for them to win. As well as, like, when they suppress votes, it tends to be like minority communities, because minority communities tend to vote more progressive. So it's not like, you know, someone's showing up to the only fucking polling station in like bumfuck nowhere and you know, like, either like using intimidation tactics or like burning the fucking building to the ground. Traditionally, higher turnout means a change in government. This time, toss the controversial wisdom aside, conventional wisdom aside. The Tories and Kennedy's UCP knew how to harvest bumper crops and votes, but very few figures from those big blue machine organizations have gotten behind Smith and the UCP's two operational principles in 2023. Campaign manager Steve Outhouse and director of the election readiness Juan Enzik are Ontario imports without experience gains, although they're respected with conservatives. Yeah, but that doesn't shit though. NDP campaign manager Nathan Rotman also came from Ontario, but has local and national chops. Rivals lack, having led the Premier's office for Notley and the federal NDP national director Sandra Hudson and Alberta NDP veteran of nearly 2 decades is the field director. Beneath the top of those party org charts, the final get out the vote print comes down to data organizations, effective micro targeting, and how potent one voluntary army is. This might come down to a toss-up. I still think that the NDP probably, but I could be wrong. I was wrong about the Ontario election, so we'll definitely see. It definitely does look like it's in favor of Notley, but I thought the exact same thing about fucking Ford and Del Duca. I was very surprised that, and there's likely reason that Mitchell Gray, Smith's deputy chief staff, is managing the local campaign in Stoniger Park, Edmonton area seat. UCP won by 20 percentage points last election, rather than neighboring Sherwood Park won by 5%. The NDP can flip Sherbrooke Park and more dozen around Alberta, and still be stuck in opposition. But if the UCP falls in the more rural Scorton Scorton riding probably comes ex-premier. I mean, it's definitely going to come down to Alberta and Calgary, honestly. Seems almost inevitable that the UCP drop from the current 64 seats. Senior UCP are preparing to lose the seat that permeates figures like Keiki Madu Edmonton Southwest, Jason Shopping, Calgary, Air City, and few other Smith ministers in Calgary and Lethbridge. But they'll fight harder than for some seats in what amounts to blue firewall in Calgary suburbs, the ring around Edmonton to defend ministers like Demos Nicolaitis, Calgary Bow, and Tyler Sandro, Calgary Arcadia. UCP have bombarded residents' mailboxes, campaign legislature playing up at local candidates and swinging the NDP, whipping the NDP. Well, the opposition is gunning for harder to hear upset. For Notley to return as premier, the New Democrats need to win at least 20 seats that went to the UCP last time. The 20th closest loss for the NDP in that race was by 6,186 votes, or 23.6 percentage points. An uphill climb for the NDP, but almost nobody is saying it's possible. Only the cockiest, the overconfident player, Alberta, will believe that they have all the answers to these questions. It's likely your bet is that the election will be closer than any. Tomorrow. Back to me on time. So yeah, record numbers in advanced polling, or for advanced polling. Usually these tend to be like more left-leaning or liberal voters, right? That tend to do so, and so the turnout was actually fairly high. Elections Alberta said that more than 161,000 ballots were cast at advanced polls on Tuesday, 60% more than opening day records set 2019 for advanced polls. 2019, Glenn Relser, chief electoral officer, said the turnout at the advanced polls was record-breaking, with almost triple the number of votes cast at the advanced polls than in general election. As of Tuesday afternoon, the advanced poll voter count was at 195,206. You're very pleased with the record-breaking turnout. Yesterday, during the first day of advanced voting, said a spokesperson of Alberta. We anticipate welcoming somewhere between 700,000 and 1 million electors during advance voting. That must have shot up last time advance polls are open until Tuesday, May 20. Are open from Tuesday, May 23rd until Saturday, May 27th. Advance poll locations are from 9 a.m. to 8 p.m. I mean, yeah, if you can live in Alberta and you can go do voting now, just go do it, man. Stopping you. If you decide to not to vote and your party or the party you wanted to win doesn't win, well then you have no right to fucking cry about it. That's the way I view it. Voters using advanced polls are allowed to vote at any advanced voting location. This adds convenience, allowing electors to vote at any advanced voting location in the province, ballot, or their home electoral division. Elections Alberta says in a news release that it will be electronic voting record. Validator. The group added it is essential electronic option due to 87 different electoral divisions. Yeah, it's so trying to look for David King. It's a former conservative. And whatever. And he said, as a long-time progressive conservative MLA and cabinet minister during Alberta's Longhead era, 2015, I was an ardent advocate of electing an NDP government. The incumbent conservative government has grown out of touch, arrogant, and shooty. Yeah, it's not surprising though. Bro, every single fucking point is just out of touch. I hope that the Conservative Party would learn humility, a visionary, disciplined, democracy-inspired leader, and reemerge as a party worthy of support. It certainly didn't happen since 2019. Alberta has governed by a zombie party that doesn't deserve a chance. Alberta deserves the best possible leadership because it is a community of great promise. I knew Peter Lugheed up close for the entire 20-year of commitment to Alberta. 2023, he would be working for Alberta. He would be including everyone. He would be making place for Alberta inside Federation, not looking for the exit. Luhid always cautioned race would not be fun for North Dakota and Florida located disciplined and consistent, not yeah, it's essentially just forcing 4 years of the 4 years of government. Alberta has lost convictions, its courage, and its way. The people of Alberta have suffered. They cannot put an end to this bizarre nightmare. I hope to see Alberta become again a community which everyone says we are all in this together. Alberta was once barn raising, helping neighbors, harvesting and rural electrification crops, hoops, and a strong pub that viable electric price of price people can always afford. Not a rural province anymore. Alberta is still a place of welcome for everyone. Not it definitely seems like with big dreams about getting in out ambitious projects, contributing, holding, sharing the work, the outcome of that work. Look ahead. Always used to say Alberta is vital to Canada project. Alberta wants in, ready to do more than its share. I believe that Peter Edge would be appalled by the flag bearers of conservatism in this election, appalled by the complete absence of leadership, that appalled by the meek field of conservative candidates, appalled by the contradictions, unreliability. Turning away completely from gracious Daniel Smith and the UCP in voters have choices. I believe creative, diverse, good government, just as victim signaling and aggressive bad for God. Some constituencies, the Alberta Party candidate or the candidate another party may provide integrity, hard work on constituents, and a loyal alternative perspective that would be invaluable to good government, good premier. Full disclosure, I believe the NDP be well served if Barry, Marshita, and like-spirited candidates are elected. Yeah, like David King is like one of the main Conservatives supporting the NDP. There's been plenty others like we saw. Just thought I should show you guys this. All right, let's move on to the on to move on to the inquiry stuff now. So we're going to start off with Pierre Poilievre saying that he doesn't want the information that Johnston had provided or was willing to offer on election interference or the lack thereof that the Conservatives are claiming about. So let's get into it, I guess.
Leader there confirming his meeting with Special Rapporteur on Foreign Interference David Johnston. The Prime Minister and NDP leader Jagmeet Singh have also met with Johnston, but Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre declined a similar meeting. Catherine Cullen, the host of CBC podcast The House, is here with more on why. So Catherine, what is Poilievre's office saying about why there was no meeting with Johnston?
Well, David, when I reached out this morning to talk to them about whether or not there had been a meeting, I was told that they had been communicating with David Johnston's office.
Full context, or for like what the other parties said. NDP said that they would take it. Classified information, right? The Conservatives were like, no, I'm not going to do that because it makes me look good saying that I wasn't informed or anything. And just fucking lie about it. And the Le Bloc Québécois are undecided. Things could have changed, but as far as I know, they haven't, so yeah.
Office that he had asked questions about any experience with foreign interference. They'd been exchanging emails. But when the special rapporteur asked to have an in-person meeting, they were only given about 48 hours notice. I was told, the leader is a really busy guy. Meeting didn't happen. This isn't consistent with what they have said about David Johnston. They've obviously been incredibly critical of that particular position. Well, we have a new statement from them this hour, and I would say we're definitely not chalking this up to a scheduling conflict anymore. I'm going to read it to you. This is a fake job held by someone who can't do it impartially. Mr. Johnston is a ski buddy, cottage neighbor, and family friend of the Prime Minister. He's part of the Trudeau Foundation.
He's literally just trying to pull the fucking Trump, and it's not even working. Like, Pierre Poilievre isn't even as fucking charismatic as Trump. Like, if we had, like, a Trump kind of figurehead running the Conservatives, more people would eat this shit up. But, this is coming from the guy who looks like he gets fucking bullied in his free time.
$140,000 of donations from Beijing designed to influence the Prime Minister. He should immediately hand this job off to someone impartial to hold a full, independent public inquiry. A point of precision that I'm sure many folks who follow the twists and turns of this story will be familiar with, David, which is that it is, of course, the Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. They did get a check allegedly at the behest of Beijing. The Prime Minister's office has said that the Prime Minister was distanced from the foundation at the time. He was not aware of it. But, fake job, I think we can clearly say that it's a political statement and not just a scheduling issue.
Oh, 100%. It's all that it is just posturing and performative political bullshit. Like, if you claim that you want the intel on it, but you're not going to be taking it, what fucking sense is that?
And again, that insistence on a public inquiry.
Yeah, there's not a lot of room for misunderstanding in that statement you got there, Catherine. I wonder what are the other parties saying about all of this?
Yeah, well, the other parties, the Prime Minister, the Bloc, the NDP, as you said earlier, they have all sat down with David Johnston. I spoke with Anne McGrath.
I guess the Bloc Québécois decided to sit down with him after all. Okay, that was probably a development that I missed then. But outside of that, the Conservatives are the only party that don't want to, get this information. It's kind of convenient, to be honest with you.
McGrath, the national director for the NDP, who was at the meeting with Jagmeet Singh. NDP MP Jenny Kwan also there. She said that she found their meeting productive, that they did, though, use the time to emphasize the need for a public inquiry. Jenny Kwan talked about concerns around the rise of anti-Asian racism and how some of this conversation is affecting diaspora communities, something she's been vocal about publicly as well. We got a sense from Mr. Blanchette of the Bloc's take on all of this. Prime Minister's office simply confirming the meeting happened. We don't have a lot of details, but we should say the Prime Minister's been quite strident in his defense of Mr. Johnston in the past, calling any attacks against him horrific partisan attacks against a man of extraordinary integrity. It's all going to come to a head soon, David, right? The 23rd, the deadline for that decision on a public inquiry, and a lot of pressure on David Johnston.
So what are the expectations on that? Because he's going to release some sort of report or give it to the Prime Minister. I'm not yet sure how it's going to roll out, but what are the expectations on that May 23rd deadline?
Yeah, I mean, let's be real, David. You and I are both sort of counting the days and wondering, is it going to be the 23rd? Is it going to be beforehand? There is an extraordinary amount of pressure, and you talk to people in all the political parties, and they will say they find it difficult to see how Mr. Johnston won't arrive at the conclusion that a public inquiry is needed. But let's be honest, what does that mean? That's a pretty big swath of options. So I think the real question here is going to be, if indeed that is the road he pursues, and there would be, I think, a very strong reaction if he didn't, what does public really mean? Is this all happening, the way we saw the Rouleau Commission, witnesses coming before him every day? Is that any more productive than the stuff we've already seen in committee? Is this something that has to happen behind closed doors because there are so many sensitive political issues involved? I mean, you think of just last night, we saw Michael Chong before Proc, right? And he didn't want to talk even in camera about some of the threats that he has, feels that he has faced that may have been because of, according to him, the People's Republic of China. He had been in contact with CSIS about it, but not comfortable speaking about it. So how do you deal with those sensitive security issues? It's clear, though, months now of the government trying to get a handle on this, and the issue does not seem to be going away. So lots of issues to talk about, including those concerns of diaspora communities, including how the intelligence community talks to each other, talks to government. We'll see what David Johnston is able to figure out.
Okay, Catherine, thanks so much. That's Catherine Cullen, host of CBC's political podcast, The House. Okay, so what are the optics of the leader of the official opposition skipping this meeting and that statement? It's time to bring in the power panel. In Toronto, Amanda Alvaro is a political commentator, and here with me in the Ottawa studio, Sherelle Evelyn, the managing editor of the Hill Times, Tim Powers, the chair of Summa Strategies, and Jordan Leiknitz, the Canada program manager for the Frederick Ebert Foundation. Sherelle, it was a scheduling conflict, and then we got that statement. I'm going to go all Ron Burgundy. That escalated quickly.
I mean, yeah, like, the Conservatives are just crying about election interference, and they have Johnson offering them information that, that there wasn't any, but, like, I honestly think that the whole reason why he's doing like playing or like pulling this is because he just wants to play fucking politics, and he wants to be like, or when it comes to his base, be like, hey, look, Justin Trudeau fucking the election. Like, the funny thing is that, like, Elections Canada is like one of the securest election frontiers on the planet, so I don't understand, fucking crying about that.
What do you make of that aggressive shift by the Mr. Poilievre?
Well, I'm not surprised, frankly.
No,
when I
don't think
heard
anyone
the
is.
initial statement about it being a scheduling conflict, the first thing I thought to myself, I'm like, is that true? I mean, it doesn't quite fit the narrative that he had been putting out about it being a fake job and yada, yada, yada. And sure enough, that's what we got a few, hours later. Think about the fact that, when Joe Biden came to town and his invite for the dinner got sent to a different email address, he found, with far less than 48 hours notice, he found time to find himself, room in his schedule to go to that dinner. So if, you prioritize the things that you want to prioritize. And so if you were to think about that being an actual scheduling conflict, it didn't really hold much water. I think, as been said, this is an entirely political statement. Other political leaders have used the opportunity to, make their political statements directly to the person, who is going to be making these decisions, and he chose to do it, from behind a spokesperson.
Yeah, Tim, the other leaders have made their political statements about the Prime Minister and the government's handling. Mr. Poilievre has made this directly and specifically about David Johnston, the former Governor General.
Yeah, look, they missed an opportunity here. I think they could have started the day by saying they're not going to meet with David Johnson because we believe that he will do whatever is in the best interest of the government. They didn't need to get gratuitously rude. They didn't need to go after David Johnson, the person. Look, there was no chance in hell Pierre Poilievre was going to meet with David Johnson because in his mind, meeting with David Johnson legitimizes the whole process. But the thing I think some of Pierre's team need to realize is that you had an opportunity here to take a bit of a high road and explain why you're not meeting. But when you go after David Johnson like this, my worry is there's 2, 3, 4% of the electorate who are still going to be assessing the Conservatives and don't like nasty. They may be angry, they may be frustrated, they may be wanting to go away from the Liberals, but they don't necessarily see what the benefit is of going after somebody like David Johnson, who has the pedigree that he does. You can disagree with everything. You can disagree with why he took the job. You do need to remember Stephen Harper put him there. So why do you do this? Why do you do this? And why do you start the day with a misdirection? Just be consistent. You can get more political ground on that
I mean,
than the way they
conservatives
ended
don't
the day.
even have to be consistent in their beliefs anymore, is the thing, right? Like, they know for a fact that their base is going to be fucking voting for them anyways, so it doesn't really matter.
According to the Mr. Poilievre's office, Mr. Johnson's pedigree now is someone who can't do the job impartially as a ski buddy, cottage neighbor, and family friend of the Prime Minister. What's your take on today?
Yeah, well, I mean, nothing new in that tone from Pierre Poilievre, but I think Tim's absolutely right. To me, when you see one story in the morning and a different one in the afternoon, that speaks to some division, some discussion happening within Poilievre's office about how to approach this. And I do think that for them, this was a missed opportunity. They really didn't hammer home their own message in choosing to light it up like this afternoon. And it also is a bit of a vulnerability because, of course, when Poilievre makes such a negative personal attack on this issue that is one that's very serious, that a lot of people think deserves a serious treatment, it leaves the door open for the Liberals to accuse him of trivializing the issue itself. So I don't think this was the smartest play from their office today. I think you really saw a much cleaner line coming out of the Bloc and the NDP on this today.
Yeah,
Amanda,
100%. Like, the NDP didn't hesitate to do so, right? Which, I mean, looks good on them. And, like, LeBlanc, like, I even think LeBlanc Québécois did a way better job on, like, even being skeptical than the fucking Conservatives did, right? Like, LeBlanc Québécois, we're like, we're not too sure, we'll have to think about it, but ended up taking it anyways, right? Like, this is just a very bad look for the Conservatives. Like, it's another fucking L that the federal Conservatives are taking, right? Because, like, we see over and over again that they consistently like taking L's. Because then when they can be, or when, stuff like this comes up later on, they can be like, oh, we weren't told about this, or whatever the fuck. Like, it's, I don't.
This is the message they want out, right? I mean, whether they were slow to get to it, this is the argument they want to be had in public about David Johnson and his legitimacy or lack thereof in their view.
Right. So it's fake job, fake news. Like, I'm surprised they didn't end the statement with "Make Canada Great Again." It's so transparent what their motivation is on these issues. He doesn't have time. They started out with he doesn't have time. He has time to rant about this issue incessantly, day in and day out. But the thing is, everyone eventually reveals their true colors. And this is such a true color moment for Poilievre. If you're sitting at home and you're taking in this issue, and I agree with Jordan, and there's a degree of seriousness around it, and you're actually looking for parliamentarians to come together and find some solutions around this issue, they have absolutely evaporated any credibility they can hold on it. You can't say this is a critical issue, an issue that all Canadians care about, but then refuse to participate in any way, even if it's to say, listen, we really want there to be a public inquiry. The Bloc met with David Johnston, the NDP met with David Johnston, obviously the Prime Minister met with David Johnston. The fact that Poilievre can't meet with him, I think is a smack in the face to Canadians who are looking for a real solve on this.
Slight disagreement with Amanda on this. I think you can say I don't want to meet with him because my position is consistent, that I don't support this
I have
inquiry.
nothing new to say.
And I think that would have been the better approach here. I won't go as far as Amanda is alluding, suggesting this is the magma moment of the Conservative Party, but I do think there's a learning moment here potentially for the Conservative Party. You've seen some of this dialogue pop out a little bit now. And Andrew Coyne wrote about it today. It's, okay, you don't always have to be angry. You've established a clear position on this. You've established that you don't believe in the rapporteur, you don't believe in any of that, and that's a legitimate position. You may not like it, but it's the position they have. You don't need to go further, and you can hold that position and hold your head high instead of looking like you always need to throw a punch or kick somebody in the teeth when you don't need to do that to win.
But there was quite the contrast in this statement and, say, Michael Chong's appearance at Proc last night, right?
Totally.
Where he laid out, we should do this the way the Brits do it. We should do this the way the Australians and the Americans do it. And he prosecuted a political argument, Sherelle, that the fact that he wasn't briefed is a failure of the machinery of government, and ultimately that rests with the Prime Minister. So the contrast is pretty stark there.
The contrast is incredibly stark, and I do feel for Michael Chong. Nobody should have to go through what he's gone through, that stress. I mean, I can only imagine.
Well, he revealed other threats, you know, beyond this, right?
100%. And people talk about how well respected he is and how liked he is, how statesmanlike he is. Michael Chong at one point ran for the leadership of the Conservative Party, and the Conservative Party and the Conservative Party members, at least the people who would vote in a leadership campaign, they like that angry. They like that attack dog. So Tim saying you don't always have to go nasty. Well, they do it because it works. So they could have had a Michael Chong leading the party, but they want a Pierre Poilievre, and that's what he's giving them.
Does it work, Jordan? I mean, they got pretty angry the last couple of elections, and like it seems to be working, right now. But can it be sustained to success?
Yeah, it works for a certain segment, a very specific segment of the voting base, but it doesn't work for many mainstream Canadians. And so I think the balance that the Conservatives are always seeking to find is how to engage that base and keep them motivated and keep them donating and keep them turning out. But then also they need to go where the voters are, which is more towards the middle of the spectrum. And so that's something that you can see that tension playing out in their strategy week to week. Although I have to say, I think in this particular instance, Chong is just a far more credible voice on this issue and far more effective for them than Pierre Poilievre. And the best thing the leader could likely do here is step back and let Chong take the spotlight on this issue for the party.
Amanda, I'm not convinced that's going to happen. I mean, Chong is out front, but Pierre Poilievre is the face and the energy of this party right now.
It certainly will not happen because they are entrenched in this kind of narrative. The inflammatory language, the hyperbole, the rhetoric that goes on and on. This is their playbook. We've seen this playbook before. I know Tim's going to get upset when I make these references to Trump's campaign, but we see the same language.
Yeah,
David Johnson has
they're
that
like
baked.
literally just trying to Canadianize the fucking Trump campaign. Like that's all that they're trying to do.
News, and they use it because it's simple, it's quotable, it's soundbiteable, it drives media attention and media narratives, and because it's tapping into this undercurrent of either distrust or this unfortunate anger that people have been feeling, and that comes from all facets of life, whether it's affordability issues or other issues that are taking place. They're tapping into that sentiment, and right now they're exploiting it. The problem is I think it can work now because it provides a great contrast to the Liberals and the Liberal government. I don't think it works well in an election campaign because I still believe that people are looking for a sense of optimism and, dare I say, hope when it comes to leadership and the vision for the country.
But Tim, Jordan made a very good point about Michael Chong, right, and his approach to this. And if you want to sort of solve this challenge, that's the way to do it. But if you want to exploit this challenge, it seems like anger is the way to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, Cheryl said it earlier. Pierre knows how well to beat the drum of anger, and it got him a leadership vote. It's important not to underestimate the anger that is out there. But for his
the thing is that anger can only get you so far, though. That's the thing. Like, after a while, people aren't going to be fucking angry at whatever the fuck they should be. or whatever they want them to be, as well as like for the most part, like a lot of the shit that the conservatives are trying to get people angry about are like nothing issues. Either because like they're just not happening, or it's just psychotic shit.
Own purposes going forward, you have to find a way to channel that anger into solution provision, or you're going to find yourself in one hell of a bloody goddamn mess, to be very descriptive in my own language. At a certain point, the solutions need to come as to why you are better than the other guy, not that just they're old and tired.
No, we'll look forward to that ombudsman's complaint for Tim's language. But Sherelle, how does this set the stage? Like David Johnston, he didn't get his meeting, but he's going to deliver a report and a recommendation by next week on whether or not to have a public inquiry. How does all of this set the stage for the special rapporteur's debut?
Well, I mean, it's kind of what we've seen from the moment he was named. Like, we know that there's something is going to have to give. He's going to have to come out with something that is either going to appease a broad swath of the political spectrum, or it's going to make a lot of people very angry. And if it goes the way of, say, not recommending a public inquiry, I don't know how the Prime Minister is going to be able to get past that. He can say that this is an independent voice who made the decision, but everything that we've got to at this point, there's no way he's going to be able to distance himself and say, hey, my hands are clean on this. I gave it to somebody to make the choice, and it wasn't me.
Jordan, on that.
We're headed to a public inquiry. It's just a question of how painful it is to get there.
Right. It's like political dentistry at this moment. We're pulling teeth everywhere.
The freezing is worn off.
Yeah, there's no more no-king.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well.
After months of leaked reports and allegations about foreign interference in Canada's democracy, a long-awaited decision came down today, and it wasn't the result opposition parties wanted. Special Rapporteur David Johnston ruled out a public inquiry. Instead, Johnston said he will hold public hearings on the policy issues he's identified so far. Johnston said he found no evidence the Prime Minister or ministers ignored intelligence or recommendations. But he did identify what he called serious shortcomings in the way security agencies share and communicate intelligence. He also takes apart some of the reporting on foreign interference, saying leaked materials were misconstrued in some media reports.
I mean, like,
he's now calling.
Here's the thing, right? As much as I don't like Justin Trudeau, he has been under fire by the fucking media. Especially conservative media. Like, I don't believe everything he fucking says, but like, yeah, like, this is just like silly, right? Like, we discussed this on the broadcast before, and like how, and how the media tries to smear him, right? Like, I get it, like, everyone's fucking tired of Trudeau. Even I'm fucking tired of him. I've been tired of him for a very long time, but like, he keeps winning. Mostly because the Conservatives put out fucking dog shit candidates, and like, as much as I'd like them to win, like, to me, to be honest, I don't think that the NDP are putting out the best like candidate for the party. Like, I like Singh, but like, I have my issues with him for sure, but I just don't see him winning, to be honest.
Of MPs, NSICOP, and the Intelligence Review Committee and CIRA to review his conclusions and tell the public if they disagree with his findings. Joining us now is Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs, Dominic LeBlanc. He's in London. Minister, thanks for making the time.
Thank you, David. Good evening.
David Johnston recommended against a public inquiry. Do you think Canadians will accept that recommendation as easily as the Prime Minister did?
David, we've said from the beginning that Mr. Johnston was a nonpartisan, thoughtful, experienced public servant who had access to all of the intelligence information, including the most classified intelligence reports, who interviewed heads of the intelligence agencies, all of the relevant officials, a number of ministers. I was interviewed by Mr. Johnston, so was the Prime Minister. He's come to this conclusion after a thoughtful and thorough analysis. And it's not, by the way, a different conclusion than the former Conservative campaign director, Fred Delory, came to when he said that a public inquiry might offer interesting political theater, but because of the very nature of the information that's contained in these documents and these reports, it can't be a public inquiry in the traditional sense of the term. We think the National Security Committee of Parliamentarians that represents all political parties, we think that the opposition party leaders who will be given security cleared to receive this most sensitive information can themselves come to the conclusion if Mr. Johnston's recommendations are reasonable. These are ways that Canadians can be, we think, reassured that all of the appropriate steps are in place to strengthen our democratic institutions. And we think Mr. Johnston explained very well, and himself, why this is the case.
But, you know, it hasn't reassured all of the opposition parties. They are united in their demand for a public inquiry. There's a Leger poll in March that said 72% of Canadians are in favor of an independent public inquiry. So is this position tenable with public sentiment and the political mood on this?
Well, first of all, Mr. Poilievre has been unreasonable and behaved like a political vandal since this issue emerged. He refused to meet with Mr. Johnston. The other party leaders met with Mr. Johnston. Mr. Poilievre, David, was Minister of
he's just playing the classic fucking conservative crybaby role. Like, he wants, so desperately wants to, like, try and be, like, a Trump figure. And, like, it's not working for him, right? So instead he's trying it seems like, especially for this issue, he's playing the classic conservative crybaby role. That's what he's doing, to be honest.
Democratic institutions, a position that I currently hold, and he did absolutely nothing about this in the Harper Conservative government when CSIS had publicly identified this as a challenge 10 years ago when Poilievre was minister. So our government has consistently taken a series of measures to strengthen the resiliency of our democratic institutions, prepare us as a government and as a society to counter the evolving threat of foreign interference. This is not something that a conversation that we've come to recently. We've been at this for a number of years. We accept Mr. Johnston's recommendations also that the government can further strengthen measures that are in place, can better share intelligence information. I'm in London today, David, because I met Tom Tugendhat, who is himself the minister responsible for strengthening democratic institutions in the United Kingdom. We talked about measures that the UK has put in place, their allies, obviously, in the intelligence work. They're facing many of the same challenges that Canada is, and it's important for us to strengthen these institutions as best as we can.
But it's not just Mr. Poilievre. Mr. Singh says he's going to use every tool he has available to try to convince the Prime Minister to hold a public inquiry into this. And while he does not quarrel with David Johnston's credibility or his reputation, he makes the point that having this done independently by a judge like Justice Rouleau did with the Emergencies Act inquiry will reassure Canadians and rebuild trust beyond simply saying, just trust us with this report without that public oversight function. So why is I understand why you think Mr. Poilievre is wrong. Why is Mr. Singh wrong?
Well, but to use the example of the Rouleau Commission, David, the Rouleau Commission was able to have witnesses representing a series of different perspectives examined on live television, cross-examined by lawyers, sworn in to publicly talk about information they had. The very nature of this sensitive intelligence information, some of which would come from Canada's allies and other intelligence agencies, cannot be disclosed in a live television. As much as we want to watch a news world, you're not going to have intelligence agencies by law able to answer some questions. And Mr. Johnston, we think, correctly identified the frustration that would then be built in. Mr. Poilievre would then say, well, it's not actually a public inquiry at all because you're not having a televised hearing where a particular intelligence agency is going to reveal what necessarily have to be classified documents. We think that there are other ways to reassure Canadians that the government is taking.
I mean, the thing is that we've also we've got information from inquiries that were classified documents beforehand.
This issue seriously, that the elections, as Mr. Johnston said, as a panel of senior public servants has said publicly, as the head of the intelligence agencies have said publicly, the 2019 and 2021 elections, 3 independent reviews have confirmed that they were free and democratic, that the decisions made were the decisions of Canadians in those elections. So if the opposition leaders want to see access, want to see this sensitive information, we're going to make it available to them. And we think that a committee of parliamentarians, for example, is also in a position to validate the conclusions that Mr. Johnston shared with Canadians today.
But, you know, the Prime Minister himself spoke about the need to restore trust in the wake of all of this, because this whole episode has undermined Canadians' trust in elections and in how democracy functions here in this country. Is this report enough to restore that confidence, in your view? It's 55 pages. Of reassurance, right? Because you can't show the primary information. Is this enough in the absence of a public inquiry?
Well, but this isn't the end of the story. Mr. Johnston will conduct himself public hearings to share with Canadians and particularly diaspora communities the importance of being prepared to counter foreign intelligence. He'll develop policy recommendations for the government. There will be another report this fall. The National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians will issue a report. So will the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency. So this isn't the end of the story. Our government hasn't also finished, David, putting in place all of the necessary measures to detect and counter foreign interference and to help build resiliency amongst Canadians, amongst parliamentarians, members of parliament and senators. These briefings are taking place. So no, it's certainly not the end of our work to reassure Canadians. And there are a number of steps over the coming weeks and months that we think will contribute to reassuring Canadians that the government is very much on top of this circumstance, that we will make the changes that are required to ensure that our position evolves as does the threat. We think taken together, all of these things can reassure Canadians.
Pages 18 and 19 of David Johnston's report paint a pretty brutal picture of how intelligence in the country is shared and consumed and communicated within government itself. And while he clears the government of any political failures in this, the systemic and structural ones are outlined there pretty starkly, about binders full of information going into departments with no clear idea of who is reading them, no clear records who has actually seen intelligence assessments, and then the way senior staffers are briefed. They're kind of left to choose their own adventure in a large binder of information with no guidance from security officials. What are you going to do to fix that, Minister?
Well, so we accept that is something that's an unacceptable circumstance. The Prime Minister has said that repeatedly. The Public Safety Minister has said it. We've issued new directives to the security agencies in the last couple of weeks. The Prime Minister has convened a number of meetings, some of which I was present at, where he's made it clear to the intelligence agencies, as has the clerk of the Privy Council. So this is being rectified. We accept Mr. Johnston's conclusions that this circumstance is unacceptable. The good news, David, is it's being corrected and has been corrected. And going forward, those examples that Mr. Johnston properly identified will not happen again.
How is it, though, that after the 2016 U.S. election, where foreign interference was a big topic, after the arbitrary detention of Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig and all of the issues in terms of dealing with China, that this sort of dysfunction persists in the sharing of intelligence within a G7 country?
So again, those are exactly the kind of questions the Prime Minister has asked the senior officials. His National Security Advisor has made it clear in conversations where I've been present that those are failings, or those are unacceptable circumstances that have to be corrected and have been corrected. It's not politicians that direct intelligence agencies in terms of how they conduct their practices according to Canadian law, but it is unacceptable in a circumstance where parliamentarians themselves, for example, have been targeted, that the senior political leadership of the government wasn't made aware and wasn't able to provide the appropriate information to those parliamentarians to build their own defenses. That work is being done and has been done. but we accept that that's a legitimate criticism, and the government's taken its responsibility to fix it.
You're in London. I know we have NSI COP, which is similar but not exactly the way it functions in the United Kingdom. Do you think we need a total overhaul of Parliament's role in assessing intelligence to have a more robust system like our allies have in the city you're in at this point?
We think we can continue to evolve our measures. We look forward to Mr. Johnston's recommendations to some extent in this regard later in October. My conversations with the British minister today talked a lot about statutory changes, legislative changes they've made around creating criminal and quasi-criminal offenses in this space. So that's the work that the Public Safety Minister and the Justice Minister are doing. The Foreign Agent Registry was also part of the conversation. That's also work that we're doing. We think we can learn a lot from allies, and that was very much the work I did this afternoon here in London.
Okay, Dominic LeBlanc, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, David. Have a good evening.
We wanted to have confidence in the entire process in order to fix the interference problem. We wanted a public, independent inquiry. That's what we wanted. What Mr. Johnston offered us is not public, it's not independent.
Now, the NDP has also called for a public inquiry, but now that one has been ruled out, where does that leave the New Democrats? Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP. He's in Nanaimo, British Columbia. Mr. Singh, thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
You've disagreed with David Johnston's decision not to recommend a public inquiry. How much pressure will you put on the Prime Minister to overrule his special rapporteur? Because right now the Prime Minister says he's going to abide by that recommendation.
Well, I'm going to make this clear in the next meeting I have with the Prime Minister. I'm going to sit down with the Prime Minister and let him know that I believe a public inquiry is still necessary, and I'll be using all the tools that I have at my disposal to make sure we continue to push for one. The reason being is there have been a lot of allegations, a lot of concerns raised, and Canadians will have more confidence in our electoral system with the rigor of a public inquiry where there are multiple questions asked for multiple lawyers and others of multiple witnesses. Witnesses are compelled to appear, and a judge, an independent judge, assesses what information can be disclosed publicly and what has to remain confidential for national security. That process of in and of itself.
Yeah, he's right. Like, you know, there definitely is things that there definitely are there are things that, you know, when it comes to inquiries that are like 100% guaranteed to be like confidential and everything, being confidential, and like, you know, things that, you know, we have access, like the public has access to, as well as like get new developments out of it too.
The rigor that will give Canadians more confidence, because I want people to believe that they can vote and their vote will make a difference.
You say we'll use all the tools. One of those tools, presumably, is the confidence and supply agreement. Will you use that tool to get a public inquiry?
That's not a decision we're making today, but there are a number of other tools like we've done in the past where we forced a vote on a public inquiry in the House of Commons, in the chamber itself. That's something that New Democrats did. That's an example of a tool that we have. We'll look at other tools and we will use the ones that we can to force this to move forward.
But that didn't lead to one. That vote happened. It's symbolic. It's not binding on the government. I know you can voice your objections and you know, use Parliament to sort of shame them, but that has no weight. That you're the only leader with actual leverage, right? With the confidence and supply agreement. So I'm wondering why you won't use it if this is so important to the basic underpinnings of our democracy.
It is very important, and that's why we're going to be pushing for solutions. We want to see Mr. Johnston's work continue. That work is important. It did uncover some key findings. The fact that the government was aware of irregularities, for example, in Hang Dong's nomination, but because CSIS didn't provide any course of action, they chose to do nothing. That, to me, is a serious red flag. Why would the government, after hearing information of irregularities, not have a follow-up, not look at improving the process, not look at maybe having their own course of action to remedy the problem? That is something that was uncovered by Mr. Johnston, which was helpful. So his work should continue. I think that's important work. I also believe strongly that a public inquiry is still important, and we'll push for that. There are other tools that we have. and we'll be providing those updates around what we'll be doing next to continue to push for it.
What other tool? I mean, a vote in Parliament is one thing. Voicing your objection to the Prime Minister in your next meeting is another. But if I again see the only obvious way to try to force Justin Trudeau to do something he doesn't want to do is the confidence and supply agreement. I mean, what other tool can be as effective as that?
We'll be providing you with details, the media with details when we make those next steps. But there's other tools, and we'll be using those tools.
Okay, but like, I guess I'm hung up on all the tools in the toolbox, right? I've got a hammer, a socket set, a wrench, a drill, a screwdriver. You know, you have the hammer that you can swing with the confidence and supply agreement. I mean, other than a meeting with him, what is the next thing New Democrats are going to do to try to force the Prime Minister to change his path?
Well, like I said, that's not a decision we're making today around the confidence and supply agreement, but there are other tools, and as soon as we are going to decide on which one we're going to use next, we'll let you know. But we want to make it very clear that we'll be letting the Prime Minister know I disagree with the decision. I think it's a wrong decision given the stakes here and how important it is for us to be able to have better accountability, given the fact that the government hasn't been taking this seriously. That I agree and accept that CSIS may not have provided them with a course of action. When they knew that there was irregularities, why didn't they act? That's an outstanding question that still remains. So we will continue to push forward on this.
Okay, but you keep talking about red flags, willful blindness, not taking it seriously. Just as a final point, I mean, you have a final question on this. You have the capacity to make them take it seriously. So when will you let us know what the next tool will be in your toolbox on this?
As soon as we make that decision, we'll be letting folks know.
Okay, one decision you have made is you will take the Prime Minister up on his offer to view the confidential annex to the Special Rapporteur's report, to David Johnson's report, linking back to the raw intelligence. Why have you decided to view that, even if the consequence of that is you cannot speak to the specifics anymore and it could limit your ability to ask questions on this in question period?
I think a responsible thing for a leader of an opposition to do is to be able to look at that information and to make my own assessment of it. There are things that the Special Rapporteur said after having viewed that information and protecting confidentiality. He said unequivocally that the allegations against Hang Dong were not true, the ones that were raised by in the media. He made that finding and said that publicly. So I'll follow and adhere all the rules.
So the reason why he's not going to do like anything for like the confidence stuff, right? Because it could potentially make him look bad, right? Which, you know, that's there definitely is the risk of losing, you know, voters when it comes to next election time. But you know, he does have leverage for sure. Make them, I think the Liberals do have an inquiry about it, right? But to be perfectly honest with you, I don't think he's. I would be genuinely surprised if he uses the leverage he has over the Liberals to do an inquiry. I would be genuinely surprised if he did.
Rules around what information can be shared and what can't be shared. I know that there will be some limitations because of it, but I think it's a responsible thing to do as a leader of an opposition party to look at that information and then to make my own assessment.
What do you make of the Conservatives' argument that this is essentially a trap, and that it's an offer that would silence the opposition and stop them from being able to hold the government accountable on these points?
What?
I think that does not sound like a leader that's interested in becoming Prime Minister. That's someone who is stuck in a closed-minded kind of view around what the responsibility and the seat of the importance of being an opposition leader. To be able to look at information, to be able to make an assessment that doesn't preclude the rest of my team from asking questions, and doesn't preclude the rest of my team from continuing to pursue different avenues of lines of questioning. I'll still be able to continue to hold the government to account as well. There will be limitations, and that's a part of being in a position of being an opposition leader. To be able to hear information, to receive information, and to be willing to do that is something that I think is a sign of leadership. And those that choose not to, I think, is a sign of a lack of leadership.
You're not alone in calling for a public inquiry, despite what David Johnson said in his reports today. But how do you get around his argument that, at least in terms of what the public is able to see, the Security of Information Act applies so strictly that there's not much more that can be revealed to the public beyond what was in his report? And even if you have a judge-led public inquiry, those same restrictions apply it's a duplication of effort for no greater public understanding of the issue.
Well, I would push back on a couple of pieces. One is the independence of a judge making that determination is something that I think would give Canadians more confidence in terms of what is disclosed and what is not disclosed. The independence and separation of an independent judge, like we saw in the Brulot Commission, is something that I think would be more reassuring to Canadians. In addition, I point to the Emergencies Act public inquiry as a template. There was information, significant information that could not be disclosed because it was of a national security interest. And then that information was not disclosed. But there was still a number of things that were disclosed through that public process that gave Canadians more confidence in the decision around calling for the Emergencies Act. That is something that we want to see happen. The fact that witnesses are compelled to appear, that there is a forum for asking those witnesses multiple questions. There's a cross-examination, if you will, of those witnesses that all provides Canadians with that confidence that steps are being taken. The same limitations that applied in the Rouleau Commission would apply, and the same limitation that Mr. Johnson spoke about are important to recognize, and I accept those. I don't deny those in any way. It would undermine our national security if certain information was released. It would undermine our ability to keep ourselves safe. So we don't want that to be disclosed. But that doesn't preclude a lot of information coming forward that gives the Canadians and the public more confidence that this matter is being taken seriously, that the questions that need answered are being asked, and that there's a strong follow-up in terms of what we do next.
Would there have been any value in meeting with Mr. Johnson just to hear him out?
No. He is Justin Trudeau's ski buddy, his cottage neighbor, his family friend, and a member of the Trudeau Foundation, which got $140,000 from Beijing. He has a fake job, and he's unable to do it impartially. He needs to simply hand it over and allow an independent public inquiry into Beijing's interference.
So was it a scheduling conflict?
No.
So you chose not, you deliberately did not meet with Mr. Johnson?
I did not meet with him. I chose not to meet with him. Yeah. I should say that in English. It's very interesting. I'll give you the scoop. I sent French was the first language in Canada. That's why I gave it they got the scoop first.
What?
All right. So I sent Johnson a letter, said, how are you going to investigate foreign interference in the Trudeau Foundation when you were part of the Trudeau Foundation? He hasn't responded. He didn't even respond to my letter on that obvious question. So we need to get this special rapporteur distraction behind us and get on with a real, full, independent public inquiry.
I hate the way that conservatives are, or the way that the media is painting them like fucking good guys in this. Like, no, the conservatives are dog shit. You know, yeah, I agree there should be a public inquiry, but like, you had your fucking chance to meet with Johnston and do similarly, or things similarly to like what the or Le Bloc Québécois did. Like, see a reason why you shouldn't. He just wants to play fucking.
I committed to listening very carefully and abiding by the recommendations that the former Governor General made, and he explained and justified his thought processes by it, and we will be following his recommendations.
The Prime Minister there saying he's satisfied with former Governor General David Johnston's decision not to call a public inquiry into alleged elections meddling and hold public hearings instead on how to tackle the issue looking ahead. The opposition, however, is rejecting the report, saying an inquiry is essential. But is it a red line for the NDP, who currently prop up the Liberal minority government? Jagmeet Singh is the leader of the NDP. Hi, Mr. Singh. Good to see you. Thank you very much for making the time.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Why, from your perspective, is an inquiry still needed after Mr. Johnston determined there was no malfeasance on the part of any politician involved?
Well, I respect the work of Mr. Johnson, but the concern that I have is there's a lot of unanswered questions. And what the public inquiry will do is answer those questions about what the government knew, when they knew it, and why they did or did not take action around that. There's a certain rigor involved with the public inquiry
the fact that multiple lawyers will be asking questions directly of ministers and the Prime Minister and security forces, that rigor and that scrutiny and that attention to how serious this is will, in my belief, give Canadians confidence that we are taking the allegations of foreign interference seriously and that we are taking clear steps to remedy it. That is so important, given, in my opinion, how important it is to make sure people believe that their votes matter, that elections work, and that the electoral system is something they can have confidence, so people actually get out and vote. That to me is really deeply important, and I think that we can restore that confidence by having something as robust as a public inquiry while still protecting national security.
The questions that you raise, though, that you say are still unanswered around who knew what and when are essentially answered by Mr. Johnston in his report. And he comes to the conclusion that nothing was brought to the Prime Minister's or his minister's attention that that sort of shows that was willfully ignored, basically. Like, that nobody knew something and ignored it willfully in order to further their own advances. What beyond that do you think an inquiry will actually determine?
Well, I can give one example of something that Mr. Johnson found that I think more questions would be very beneficial. For example, in the Hang Dong situation, it's become very clear that the Prime Minister was aware, that the government was aware that there were irregularities. Now, they weren't provided with any actionable items. They weren't told to take this step or not take this step. But the fact that there were irregularities raised, and from what we have learned from Mr. Johnston, there was no follow-up taken, no additional questions asked, no follow-up in terms of what should we do, no decision made by the Prime Minister or the Liberal Party to then say, well, given these irregularities, we're going to take this action to remedy that, or to maybe have another process in place. The fact that they just received information, which was a red flag, and then didn't do anything because they weren't told to do anything, to me shows a lack of responsibility with something as serious as that. The fact that there was communication breakdowns between the security forces and CSIS and the government, the fact that that communication breakdown occurred raises more questions. Why did it occur? How did it occur? And we're relying on Mr. Johnston's work. He asked these questions and received these responses. And on public inquiry, the public will see these questions being asked and multiple people asking these questions. And then the independence of a judge to determine whether or not some of that should be deemed confidential to protect national security and what amount of that can be made public. We've got a template of how that works with the Emergencies Act Commission and the Rouleau Commission. It showed us a template for lots of information was confidential, could not be disclosed, but a lot of information, much more, was disclosed to the public. But that gave people confidence that the process was followed and people were able to have confidence in the decision.
With all due respect, though, Mr. Singh, I think Mr. Johnson's point today was the salient bits of information, right? The classified information that he was able to view in order to make the determination about the various allegations as they were reported by media, that stuff would not be available publicly. So again, is it, and I think this is the way the government would characterize it, is it just kind of a fishing expedition on your part or other opposition parts in order to keep this issue top of mind, even when there isn't the proof there that, you know, the Prime Minister and his colleagues acted in a willful way to mislead Canadians?
Well, we're not talking about the misleading of Canadians. I would still hold, based on the findings of Mr. Johnston, that there was a willful blindness, absolutely. That when red flags were raised to the government, to the Prime Minister, to ministers, when concerns were raised by CSIS, CSIS did not provide them with steps that they recommended. But the government didn't follow up. And I gave the example of Hang Dong, where there were irregularities raised around the nomination process by CSIS, and they didn't recommend any course of action. They just said there's some irregularities. But I would think someone would take that seriously, that the Prime Minister, the ministers, the Liberal government would take that seriously and say, okay, given that there's irregularities raised here, even though we're not being told to take any particular action, we should do a follow-up here. We should find out, well, what do those irregularities mean? How does that impact the outcome? Maybe we need to have another process in place. Do we need to redo the nomination meeting given these irregularities? None of that follow-up happened. So what I would say, a public inquiry would allow for these type of questions to be asked. Why weren't there any follow-ups? Why not ask additional questions? Why not pursue another course of action to remedy those irregularities? Why didn't those steps, weren't those steps taken? There's a lot of questions that remain. And for me, the fundamental why this is all important is because people should be able to vote. I've seen a declining voter turnout, and we know there's many reasons to it, but one of those has to be making sure people feel that they can vote, that their vote matters, that the electoral system is something that they can have confidence in. And these type of allegations, I'm sure, will erode some of that confidence, and I want to restore that.
Well, we don't. I can see why you would, presuppose that or guess that, but we don't have any proof at this point that that is what has contributed, or to what degree it might have, to a declining voter turnout. Just before I let you go, Mr. Singh, though, I do want to ask you kind of how big of a deal is this to you? And you know this question is coming. It certainly comes with every issue that you raise. But right now, in effect, you are keeping the government.
Honestly, I don't really think he's gonna do this, right? Like, it's just something that he can keep the above the head girls, right? For like some form of more leverage, but I don't really I don't know. I just don't really see this going anywhere, to be honest.
Government in power. Is this something you're willing to force? And by that, I mean, would you withdraw your support of the government over this issue?
That's not a decision we're taking today. We believe that Mr. Johnson's work should continue. He's uncovered some important findings, and those are important things for Canadians to know about. But I remain resolute that we do need a public inquiry. So I'll be sitting down with the Prime Minister to let the Prime Minister know I believe a public inquiry is still required. And I'll be also letting the Prime Minister know that we'll be using all tools that we have at our disposal to continue to push for one.
Okay, Mr. Singh, thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Mr. Johnston, it's good to see you again.
Good to be with you, Omar.
On the one hand, you've shut the door on a public inquiry because you say Canadians won't have access to sensitive, classified information. And at the same time, you've admonished the leaker or leakers because you say those leaks lack context and contribute to what you call misapprehension.
I mean, here's the thing when it comes to leaking, right? I am very pro leaking or from whistleblowers or whatever, right? So the thing is regardless of whichever party it is in charge or whoever doing it, I think that leaking is good, right? It allows the public to get an understanding of what's going on behind the scenes, as well as generally when really big leaks happen, there's also a lot of change when it comes to a lot of the horrific shit that's going on behind closed doors, right? Because when they find out, public finds out that a fuck ton of terrible shit going on, it's understandable that people wouldn't really be too impressed by that. So leaking is always a good thing. I have no problem with any form of leaking.
Is there not a risk, though, that if you don't have a public inquiry, those leaks could increase?
There are two different questions there, Omar. First of all, the reason we can't have a public inquiry dealing with the question of who knew what, when, and what did they do with it is because to get at that whodunit, you have to deal with classified information. We can't disclose that classified information in the public realm, either for a hearing about it or a report that details that. And the reason for that is it's based on secure networks. Some of the sources we have whose lives would be at stake if this becomes an open matter that confers. Our relationship with our Five Eye allies and others, we share information, that disappears. So much as we would like to have a public inquiry into this question of who knew what's on, it can't be done in using classified information. And therefore, you can't put it out on the public. What we do say is that there are accountability committees created by statute, the National Security and Intelligence Review Agency and the National Security and Intelligence Committee of Parliaments, both of which have an oversight role, both of which will review our report and the confidential annex and come to a conclusion as to whether we're right or wrong in our conclusions. They, of course, will face the same difficulty that when you get into classified information, you can't deal with in the public. So that's the dilemma we have in all public. What we do say is when we get into the challenges in our machinery of government, and there are some with respect to how we manage foreign influence, especially because it's grown so exponentially in the last 2 or 3 years, we have much work to do to improve it. In the second part of our mandate, the next 5 months, we will have public hearings to deal with precisely those things, and we hope to come up with recommendations that will be very helpful in improving our system.
I understand the dilemma that you're presenting, but
Right.
my question is, this decision that you have made, that was made public today,
Yes.
does it not embolden people who clearly want to say something, the leakers within the intelligence community, does it not embolden them to come out with even more information, which you admitted today is piecemeal, it lacks context, and could add to the misapprehension that you spoke about today?
Well, one cannot encourage and countenance leakers. These are people, if they're qualified security professionals, who are well educated, signed up to be part of the security establishment, took an oath to maintain total confidence on classified information, and under the Securities and Information Act are committing crimes when in fact they disclose that. One can't have a system like that that operates because our whole security intelligence apparatus begins to crumble and people's lives are at stake and we lose the ability to contribute with our 5 eyes.
I mean, couldn't you make the same arguments for the Emergencies Act inquiry? Like, I'm sure you could, right? But like I understand like this is a little bit more complicated than that for sure. Because, you know, you have foreign adversaries and allies. Like I get that it's going to be like a little bit more complicated than that, but like I'm sure you could make the exact same arguments for the Emergencies Act inquiry that happened too, right?
I think people who feel that they have a real sense of grievance about our system is become private citizens and come and provide some testimony to us at our public hearings on what you think is wrong, or do a submission to us, and we'd be very glad to look at it. But you can't reform, I think, by encouraging people to break the law and then carry out their particular concern or protest. We must function through our democratic institutions, which do encourage a whole range of ideas on how we can improve our government.
Journalists, though, get information that is redacted from time to time,
Sure.
that they will then report on.
Yes.
Is there absolutely, unequivocally, no scenario where there could be a public inquiry where even some of the most sensitive information you talked about today is redacted to a certain extent, thereby achieving the goal of some transparency for the public, which obviously is very...
I mean, yeah, we did that for the Emergencies Act inquiry, if I remember correctly, right? A lot of the more sensitive stuff was redacted.
This issue of foreign interference and making sure that this information is out in the open. Was that scenario even entertained?
Well, I think the notion of redaction is possible, but then do you have enough in what's left to be able to come to an intelligent assessment? If the non-redacted part is left there on the line.
But how do we know that if that isn't even, it appears that the door was slammed on that even before that process was entertained, because you said today that Canada may also have a problem with overclassification too, right?
I think that should be examined. Can we be more relaxed in what we're doing in terms of what is classified and not classified? And other jurisdictions face the same problem, and I think we can learn from them. But there becomes an absolute line where you simply can't expose certain gathering of intelligence, and the difficulty with the leaked reports is based on only a partial...
Just say spies. Honestly, just say spies. Come on, man. Like, this is so stupid, right? Like, we've done public inquiries with very sensitive information beforehand, and, you know, it's a little bit convenient that they're doing so now, or they're not doing an inquiry now, for sure. But like I said time and time again beforehand, if the federal Liberals have nothing to do, or nothing to worry about, you know, they should be perfectly fine with public inquiry, right? I don't think that the NDP will hold them to account and like essentially force them to do an inquiry. I don't think that they will. That could look bad on them, sure, but we'll have to wait and see on that. But like this whole argument that there's incredibly sensitive shit within these reports, like, okay, redact that shit. Simple solution.
Understanding of the whole panoply of information. Even with documents that presumably have been taken from secret files, they only tell a part of the story. To come to an understanding of a real threat and act upon it usually involves many different pieces of information, usually gathered over a period of years, and very often drawing on the intelligence of our allies.
Could there have been a scenario where a process had been initiated to examine what could and what could not have been redacted first before shutting the door on a public inquiry completely?
Well, I think that process has been done with respect to what's classified and what isn't classified. In the documentation and the testimony that was given to us by security officials, they went, I think, as far as they could in trying to move that threshold of what must be secret and must not, more so than I've seen in any other circumstance. Nevertheless, it left a substantial
No one's asking
body of
for
evidence,
full
which we
fucking
have
like
collected in our
transparency
confidential report,
and
which
like
will be
for
reviewed by the two committees I mentioned.
for confidential files. Like literally, no one's doing that. It's so fucking stupid, right? Because like the thing is that like you're gonna redact like the more inherent sensitive things, right?
To handle that. So yes, there's been some relaxation there, and one of the issues that we'll face in the next 5 months is, can we be more flexible with classified and declassifying information? Now, we don't want to declassify as President Trump suggested. I simply think it's declassified and it is. We have something a little more robust than that. But that's just to illustrate that other of our allies have these problems in spades. And I think we can do a better job of trying to understand MI5 in the UK, the Australians who've been very enterprising in dealing with foreign threats, manage this difficulty of what you must keep in secret and trust us, and what you can put in the public realm. The one thing we can do, I think, to deal with that issue, Omar, is to be much more active in communication with the public. The foreign influence is real, it's pernicious, it's growing, it's very sophisticated, and the advent of digital media just puts us in a whole new world as to how we handle it.
Which we knew about, to be fair, before today's first report was revealed, right? The Public Safety Canada acknowledged that foreign interference poses one of the greatest strategic threats to Canada's national security. The intelligence gaps that you talked about in your report have been highlighted previously as well.
Yes.
So for the average Canadian out there, what are some of the fresh takeaways from the report today?
I think the fresh takeaway is that foreign influence is very real, pernicious, growing, not going to go away, and it does real danger. It especially does danger to our minority communities, our ethnic communities, who in many respects, and I think of the Chinese communities right now with Chinese influence, are victims of this and carry this burden of being, they're wonderful Canadian citizens. All of a sudden they're viewed with suspicion because of this foreign influence, which attempts to get at people and influence them one way or other. That's really an awful situation, and I think we must understand that there are influences at work that are trying to turn ourselves against one another with respect to that kind of thing. A lot of work to be done, public education, but I think we have to lead with our elected officials to bring this to the forefront and say it's real, it's tough, and here's what we're doing, and here's what we must do more effectively to be sure people understand what we're dealing with.
I think some people watching the press conference today or reading your report might be wondering what the action plan is.
Yes.
That you have acknowledged that it's a pernicious threat that challenges fundamental institutions in this country and democracy itself. Some of these issues have been highlighted before today's report, and yet fundamentally, aside from the public hearings that you have outlined at some future date, what fundamentally changes tomorrow to address an urgent threat to Canada's democracy?
Well, we outline in the report about 9 different initiatives that have been taken over the past 3 or 4 years to deal with this growing threat. Beginning with the 2 committees I mentioned that are oversight committees created by legislation through Parliament, the Agency Review Committee and the Committee with respect to Security and Intelligence. They have an important watchdog role to lead our response to this. Of the 8 or 9 initiatives I've just mentioned, these have all come about in responding to a threat, but what happens is it's bigger and larger. And in the work we'll do in the next 5 months, and we expect parliamentary committees to be doing that as well, we'll be looking especially at how our allies are handling this problem and what we can learn from them, and as they would say, what they can learn from us.
Page 27 and 28, you outline how CISA sent a note to then Public Safety Minister Bill Blair and his Chief of Staff that China intended to target MP Michael Chong, but that neither the minister nor his Chief of Staff received that message because they did not have access to a top secret network to access that email. The Public Safety Minister did not have access to this top secret network. If intelligence officials can't even communicate that information, that basic level of information to elected officials, does it make our Five Eyes partners lose faith in Canadian intelligence?
That was a mistake. That was a problem in our machinery of government that should be rectified. Moreover, when that became understood, then the Minister of the National Direct Securities Intelligence Advisor met with Mr. Chong to deal with that, and a new protocol was developed which said, as these threats ripen, but not necessarily crystallized into something that is clear and present danger, there must be a communication with those particular facts in moving into this secret territory with elected members of Parliament. So that protocol is now in place, but that's making policy on the fly. That's the kind of thing that should be done in a very considered way. And with respect to that issue, yes, our allies look at that and say, that's not acceptable, that your machinery of government is not providing a tracking of how that information goes up and what happens to it.
Mr. Johnston, last question. You know, your mandate officially ends in October. I know you were asked at several points today in the news conference. There has been a lot of attention placed on your critics saying that you're too close to the Prime Minister, which you spoke about in today's press conference as well. Given that we are in a time when there is, our institutions have been called into question and appearance and optics matter,
right.
Despite your credentials, do you think, or have you ever entertained a scenario where perhaps you step aside and have somebody else take on part 2 of this process?
Well, number one, Omar, when I was elected to do this, those who appointed me understood who I am and what my background is. With respect to the allegations of not being impartial and not being able to be nonpartisan, the friend of the current Prime Minister is simply this. When our daughters were about the same age as he, 11, 12, and his 2 brothers, we had a condo at the slopes of Mont Tremblant ski mountain within 100 meters of the actual trails. Their father had a country place at Morin Heights about 50 kilometers away from us. And about 5 occasions over 2 or 3 years came and parked his car at our parking space, and we went and skied for the day on the hill. So our children got to know one another when the current Prime Minister was 12 years old. On one of those occasions, he had to go back to Montreal, and I dropped the 3 boys off at their mother's country place with her second husband, which was about 10 kilometers. That's the distance. Those were the only occasions where I had direct meetings with the young Mr. Trudeau. He was a student at McGill, like 20,000 other students, and I waved at him from time to time. Between then and when he was elected to Parliament, and as Governor General, I saw him on ceremonial things, I never had a meeting with him. I was never in his home. He wasn't in my home. We never exchanged a telephone call, an email, letters. The only occasion I recall meeting him was when my wife and I attended the funeral of his father. So there was no friendship. There was no connection. So that's just an unfortunate allegation. With respect to my connection with the Trudeau Foundation, when I was asked to do this, I asked the retired Supreme Court of Canada Judge, Justice Frank Iacobucci, to review the matter, and he concluded there was no conflict of interest, nor an appearance of one. The Trudeau Foundation was something I respected much as a university president because it was one of the most important scholarships in the areas of social sciences and humanities, something we're discussing today in terms of improvements. And when I stepped down as Governor General about a year later, late 2018, I was asked if I would become a member of the association of the Trudeau Foundation, which is like shareholders of a company, and your duty is to attend the annual general meeting, nothing involved with decision making, in which case you receive an annual report, you approve the financial statements, you elect the auditors for the subsequent year, and you elect the board of directors. I participated, I think, in about four of those meetings, 3 of them or 4 of them by Zoom, and one which occurred in Ottawa, where I was there for about an hour and a half between meetings. So I was not a participant in the decision making. I was not a member of the board of directors. I had no particular influence on strategy or decisions. And this relates to an issue that occurred 2014, 2015 with a gift, and I joined it in 2018. So there's nothing there. And the final area of attack is somehow I can't be impartial or nonpartisan. And I simply say to that is that as a professor of law, I've chaired or served on somewhere between 2 and 3 dozen advisory committees to government, including recommended by a Conservative Prime Minister to be Governor General for 5 years and then extended by that government for another 2 years. At no time in any of those occasions was my integrity or my impartiality questioned. Why would it happen all of a sudden now with this particular mandate? Are there other people who can do it? Yeah. Are they going to be subjected to some kind of accusations? What troubles me about that most of all is this is a precious country. It's our responsibility to protect it, to be stewards of it. If you're asked to serve in a public service position, you don't say, well, I don't think I want to.
It's good to see that we got literally almost nothing out of this.
But it's a chilling effect when you have these kinds of allegations that are then carried that somehow suggest that you are part of a scheme or that you can't be trusted. I wrote a whole book about trust when I was Governor General called 20 Ways to Build a Better Country on Trust. And I did so because I'm concerned about trust in public institutions. And this kind of invective is what weakens our trust in our public institution, and it's precisely what our enemies want to see, to put our democratic institutions into disarray. This is a blessed country. I don't know of a country that comes close to us. The U.S. News and World Report does an annual survey of the most admired countries in the world. Guess what? Canada is usually in first place or the top 2 or 3. Why is that so? It's because we've been able to make this interesting experiment in diversity and inclusivity work for all Canadians. That's precious, and it's precious because the values that underline who we are and how we govern ourselves.
Nice, like, not answering questions.
On May 5th, it was confirmed that the Right Honourable David Johnson.
The Liberal.
The public.
Oh, there's.
Scott Reed standing by, CTV News political commentator, with his take on this and the repercussions, Scott, of not holding a public inquiry for the government and for the Prime Minister personally. What do you think?
Well, an entirely predictable response from the opposition. In particular, Poilievre just swings a sledgehammer. I mean, when a small tool might do, he nevertheless brings the biggest thing in the toolbox and has to, of course, ascribe motive to the government. They're, as far as he is concerned, engaged with Beijing in some traitorous, treasonous plot. So I don't think his rhetoric does him any great justice. But at the end of the day, I think what we're seeing is that the absence of a public inquiry leads people to move to their partisan corners, and that's what we're getting. So the government has decided that's enough. We're going to fight it out. We'll just tough this thing out. That's what the recommendation is. And in effect, what they're doing is they're saying we don't believe that the opposition can sustain this as an issue that will dominate Canadians' thoughts throughout the summer, back into the fall, and really change the course of not just the next election, but the next number of months.
They have said, the government, and David Johnston has said, look, we can't have a public inquiry because this is classified intelligence, so we can't make it public. It puts people at risk. But is it not possible to do it in a certain way where you could kind of still have a public inquiry, but make sure there are perhaps guardrails so that, classified, highly sensitive intelligence is not made public, but you still have an independent judge in charge of a public inquiry?
I believe so, and I believe so because I looked to, Justice Dennis O'Connor, who looked into the Morar affair in the early 2000s. I was part of a government that asked him to take a look at that matter, and it involved Five Eyes intelligence. It involved rendition of a citizen to a foreign country. It involved our allies. It involved a war, and so I think you can manage it. What that wouldn't do is it would not silence Pierre Poilievre. Pierre Poilievre would remain unsatisfied with that. He would say, well, any restrictions, he would seize upon any restrictions, any guardrails whatsoever as evidence that really, the important material is being concealed from Canadians. But he at least would be forced into that tiny piece of real estate. He'd be forced into that tiny corner. And of course, it would also remove the distraction of people arguing about David Johnston and how close he really is to the Trudeau family, because presumably you would appoint a separate judge. These hearings, remember, that are going to proceed over the summer will be held by David Johnston, and that means that he'll continue to be a target for partisan attack.
Do you think this story is hitting home with voters, Scott? If so, how?
Well, a couple of things. I don't want to be glib. I don't just want to be the political analyst that comes on and talks like a jerk about, the scorecard of, who's up, who's down in the pure partisan Olympics. This is an important issue. This is about the integrity of our democratic institutions and our democratic processes. I happen to think that David Johnston got it right insofar as I believe there are large efforts to interfere with those institutions, but I don't believe they've succeeded. And I think, frankly, Canadians care about that issue. I don't think that they're going to vote on that issue. I don't think that they literally believe that, China is turning the course of events here in Canada sufficient that it's going to count.
Like, I don't necessarily disagree with him for sure, but like, the thing is that like, right-wing hogs are going to give a shit about that, which, for the most part, like, they're nothing fucking voting base anyways. But like, that is the group that is definitely going to, look to this for sure.
Cost them to cast their ballot differently as compared to, say, the price of gas.
I honestly don't think that the average Canadian right now gives a shit about that. For the most part, I think people are more concerned with like the cost of living, or gas prices, food prices, whatever, healthcare, that stuff. Unless they're like brain broken like me, I don't think most will care about this, to be honest.
The price of groceries and those other, kitchen table issues. So does it matter? It matters a great deal. Is it going to dictate the terms of the next election? Not necessarily. Does that mean that the government
I don't think it's going to either.
Treat it seriously, even as a political matter, that it would like to get this past them, that it would like to actually give itself the breathing space to get back to its governing agenda? I would think so.
Scott, always good to have you part of our coverage.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pictured
Yeah, so there's also this
starring in a new anime is in the news following a refusal to be informed about what's going on with foreign election interference. You see, the former Governor General David Johnston released his report this week. The report suggested that concerns of foreign interference were largely unfounded. Now, how you feel about the report is a whole different conversation, but the report was largely based on confidential information. A lot of the information involved in this report is very sensitive. As a result, the leaders of all the major political parties were offered private briefings. In the briefings, it would be explained exactly how the conclusions were reached. The problem is, if Poilievre finds out what actually happened, he can no longer lie about it.
Yep.
So instead, Poilievre is focused on
and that's exactly why he's not he's not willing to accept that information.
Attacking Johnston, calling him Justin Trudeau's ski buddy. So Poilievre has been offered special security clearance, and he doesn't want it. He claims that this would somehow silence him. But if he actually cared about the truth, wouldn't he want to hear it? But he doesn't. He's much more interested in just playing politics. I think Johnston summed it up well. This matter is too important for anyone aspiring to lead the country to intentionally maintain a veil of ignorance on these matters. While political parties may disagree about policy and priorities, they should do so from a common understanding of the true facts, not as speculated or hypothesized from media reports based on leaks of partial information. But that's Skippy's whole vibe. Jagmeet Singh says that he will accept the secret briefings. The bloc remains undecided.
Since then, they have decided that they did want it.
But this is ridiculous. Poilievre has a chance to hear the truth, but he isn't one to let the truth get in the way of a good story. So instead, he's going to continue pounding the drum about election interference without any real evidence, and he has a chance to see the evidence and he doesn't want to, because it would force him to stop lying. This is insane.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that, like, even Aaron O'Toole fucking said that like, if this was him, he would 100% do so. I don't. Maybe I'm getting some things mixed up. Johnson says no public inquiry on foreign interference. David Johnston has recommended against calling a public inquiry into foreign interference in Canadian politics. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the government will follow that recommendation. Johnston's decision comes after all opposition parties have called for inquiry after the government itself said it would support one if Johnston recommended it. When I began the process, I thought I would come to the same conclusion, that I would recommend a public inquiry, Johnston said in a news conference on Tuesday. While it would have been an easy choice, it would have not been the correct one. Johnston, appointed by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, as a special rapporteur on foreign interference in March in response to the fervor over Chinese government interference, has spent the last 2 months reviewing documents and interviewing policymakers. Johnston also defended his impartiality in response to the attacks from conservative leader Pierre Poilievre, citing Johnston's relationship with Trudeau's family and Pierre Elliott Trudeau Foundation. Well, he isn't recommending a public inquiry, Johnston said in his report. He did not find find serious shortcomings in the way intelligence is communicated and processed from security agencies through the government. Johnston said he will continue his work special rapporteur through to October by holding hearings to find ways to fix these shortcomings. He said he will proceed or produce a second report later this year. The public process should focus on strengthening Canada's capacity to detect, deter, and counter foreign interference in our elections, and the threat of such interference represents our democracy, Johnston said in his report table today. Johnston said he found no ethical fault with the way the federal government handled foreign interference. I have found the narrative that the federal government failed to act. It's not the fair conclusion based on the facts, Johnston said. However, the machinery of the government needs a significant improvement to address the evolving threat of foreign interference. Johnston asked the National Secretary and Intelligence Review Agency, an independent government agency, and the National Security Intelligence Committee of Parliamentarians, a joint parliamentary committee, to review his conclusions. His 5 conclusions are foreign governments are attempting to influence political candidates and voters, and that more needs to be done to combat these attempts. That much of the media reporting on foreign interference raised legitimate questions, but did not have full context, and as a result was misconstrued by journalists. That there are serious shortcomings in how security agencies relay information to the government, and there's no evidence the Prime Minister or Minister knowingly failed to act on intelligence, advice, and recommendations. That a process other than a public inquiry is required to examine foreign interference, including public hearings, on the issues the report has identified. The conclusions in his report should go to the NSIRA and the NSICOP for reviews, and that those bodies should report publicly if they reach different conclusions. Trudeau and his government will follow Johnston's recommendations and will not call for a public inquiry despite the pressure from opposition parties. I committed to listening very carefully and abiding by the recommendations that the former Governor General made, Trudeau told a news conference on Tuesday. Johnston explained and justified his thought processes by it, and we will be following his recommendations. Trudeau said he sent letters to other party leaders offering them security clearances so that they are able to review the intelligence Johnston accused in putting together the report or access in. I certainly hope that all party leaders will avail themselves of the opportunity to understand the facts of the solution as we continue to debate on how to best keep Canadians, our businesses, our research, and especially our democracy safe. Said Trudeau acknowledged that he saw Johnston a few times as a kid and that he got to know him after entering politics when Johnston was Governor General, but said he has no total confidence that Johnston will continue to work as special rapporteur. Citing unnamed national security sources, the Globe and Mail and Global News have reported on a range of influence and interference operations coming from Beijing, particularly during the 2019 and 2021 elections. They include attempts to intimidate and influence members of parliament, funding political candidates, and operating so-called police stations across Canada to intimidate dissenters. Johnston told that while the threat of foreign interference is real and Ottawa should address it, he found much of the media reporting on the issue was misconstrued and devoid of context after he reviewed the relevant intelligence. Johnston was particularly critical of one person or people of the person or people behind the national security leaks. I mean, yeah, it doesn't look good for him. That's why you'd be critical of them. But leaking is good. I know. Any responsible agency intelligence professional knows how destructive and dangerous leaks can be. Yeah, for their fucking careers. That's why they don't like them. As well as, they leak the horrible shit that happens within the fucking things that they're doing. Johnston said, it is a matter of urgency that all efforts be made to identify and hold the leakers responsible. Malice cannot be ruled out. The RCMP is investigating the source or sources of the leaks. Johnston is also critical on how intelligence agencies, including the Canadian Security Intelligence Service and the Communications Security Establishment, share intelligence with the federal government. The materials are cemented, but no one track of who specifically receives or reads them, Johnston says. This means there can be intelligence that is sent to various consumers, but does not always actually consumed. Johnston also found gaps in the ways agencies and federal government departments share information. He said the fact that Canada is seen as a target for foreign interference is a sign of strength, not a sign of weakness. Not necessarily. Foreign adversaries see our free, open democratic society and seek to undermine it. All opposition parties have called for a public inquiry into foreign election interference, and the Liberal government said it would call one if Johnston recommended it. The public inquiry would be able to hold public hearings, 20 witnesses, and produce a report. It would be led by a former judge. But Johnston says he thinks an inquiry isn't the best way to address foreign interference and problems with intelligence. A person reading a public inquiry would be unlikely to learn more about who knew what, when, and what was done with intelligence than has been available, Johnston said. Duplicating this effort would not be productive and would lead to delay addressing the issue. Johnston added that the sensitivity of the intelligence would create difficulties for a public inquiry, and that the fact that he found the government not commit any wrongdoing wakens the case of an inquiry. The failures I have found relate to the internal gaps in the communication and the process of intelligence information, as opposed to prime ministers, and or senior officials ignoring intelligence recommendation, Johnston said. A future review of the specific media allegations through a public inquiry would not advance our ability to amend arrangements and strengthen our institutional capability to detect or counter foreign interference. Johnston did not substanize many of the allegations made in media about Beijing's foreign interference. With respect to a global news story that said the Chinese government gave $250,000 to 11 candidates in the 2019 federal election, Johnston said there is limited evidence the Chinese government intended to provide funding for 7 liberal and 4 conservative candidates through a community organization and an unnamed Ontario Progressive. He added there's no evidence Beijing followed through with the plan or the candidates, including the MPP, ever received any money. A story by Global News citing an unnamed national security source said Liberal MP Han Dong advised an official at the Chinese consulate in Toronto to lengthen the detention of Michael Kavrig and Michael Spetver, 2 Canadians the Chinese government had detained, most likely spies. Probably why. The allegation is false. Mr. Dong accused the two Michaels with the PRC official, but did not suggest to the official that the PRC extended their attentions. Johnston. Johnston said there were irregularities involving the Toronto Chinese consulate and Dong's nomination as a Liberal candidate in the Don Valley North riding, but he added he found no evidence Dong was aware of this. Trudeau on Tuesday did not rule out welcoming Dong back into the Liberal caucus. The report by Mr. Johnston was fairly unequivocal that there was false allegations made. Dong, Trudeau said, I look forward to having conversations with him. He decided to step away from caucus in order to clear his name. I will hear from him on what he's thinking is going forward. Canada recently expelled diplomat Zhao Wei after a national security source told the Globe and Mail he had been assigned to target Conservative MP Michael Chong and Chong's family in China. The government ordered CSIS to start sharing intelligence with parliamentarians threatened by foreign government following story of Chong. Johnston said he found evidence that Chinese official contemplated taking unspecified action against Chong and sought to build a profile on him, but there's no evidence they threatened either Chong or his family. Johnston also said, no, there's evidence the Chinese government dislikes former Conservative MP Kenny Chiu, who has been a vocal critic of Beijing, while Johnston acknowledged misinformation on Chiu. Fred said he did not find evidence of the Chinese government source. Chinese Canadian MP, including Mr. Chiu, were and remain of particular interest to the PRC, he said. Conservatives have been critical of Johnston's appointment as special rapporteur, pointing to his friendship with the Trudeau family and his former position as a member of Pure Elliott Foundation. At a news conference, Johnston, who served as Governor General from 2010 to 2017, defended his appointment. He said he went on 5 ski trips with the Trudeau family decades ago, and that he sometimes drove the Trudeau children to their mother's home after trips. But Johnston said he had no unofficial contact with Justin Trudeau since the Trudeau family member of Parliament since 2008. Those were the facts. With the so-called friendship skiing, said Johnston. Johnston said he got involved with the Trudeau Foundation because he provided scholarships, and Johnston has a long career in higher education. Said the foundation invited him to be a member following his term as Governor General, and that he attended 4 Trudeau Foundation meetings. Said donated to the foundation a few times. He said his impartiality and integrity have never been questioned over the course of his public service career, said he finds the attack very troubling. This kind of baseless accusation diminishes trust in our public institutions and deters people who are publicly minded, who are quite prepared to take on public service responsibilities, he said. There's a chill on them, and it's quite troubling. Trudeau Foundation has been under fire over 2016 donation from two businessmen allegedly linked to the Chinese government. The nonprofit's board of directors and CEO announced their resignations last month, citing the political climate surrounding a donation received by the foundation in 2019. Polyev, who is leader of who is the only party leader who has refused to meet with Johnston in the lead up to the report, Polyev renewed his attacks on Johnston impartially Tuesday. Trudeau's ski buddy, we already know about this. Polyev called the report a whitewash attempt and said Johnston is a conflict of interest. He continued to call for a public inquiry into foreign interference. That's what I will deliver when I am Prime Minister. There will be a full public inquiry into this mess, Polyev said. Polyev said he has no participation in any of Johnston's public hearings and would not seek to join the NSI COP wake of the report. And then Singh also criticized. Yeah, that's that. So I guess we'll call it there. I gotta get ready to go. And yeah, guess I'll see everyone tomorrow. Probably play more Zelda, and maybe later I might do some Amogus. Till then.